In a world where silence means survival, one woman's single mistake puts her directly in the crosshairs of the most dangerous man in the city, a crime lord who destroys anyone who dares to enter his private domain. But instead of ending her life, he makes a choice that terrifies her even more. He decides to keep her. This is the story of Evelyn Park, the invisible maid who became impossible to ignore, and the ruthless man who claimed her as his own. If you're ready for a story about power, obsession, and the thin line between protection and possession, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The sugar bowl slipped. That was all it took. One moment of distraction, one trembling hand, one ceramic bowl tumbling through air that suddenly felt thick as water. Evelyn watched it fall in horrible slow motion, her breath catching somewhere between her throat and her chest, knowing that the next few seconds would determine whether she walked out of this room or was carried out. The bowl shattered against the mahogany desk with a sound like bones breaking. White sugar exploded across dark wood, scattering over papers that absolutely, categorically, under no circumstances should have been touched by anyone except the man who owned them. The man who owned everything in this house. The man who owned, in ways both legal and decidedly not, half the city beyond these walls. Adrian Voss. Evelyn's hands flew to her mouth, but the damage was already done. Sugar crystals glittered across what looked like architectural blueprints, financial documents with numbers that had too many zeros, and photographs of men whose faces she recognized from news reports about people who'd gone missing. Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought they might crack. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty office, even though sorry wouldn't mean anything. Sorry didn't unspill sugar from confidential files. Sorry didn't make you invisible again once you'd been catastrophically, irreversibly seen. Her first instinct was to run. Just leave it, walk out, disappear into the maze of hallways, and hope that somehow this would be blamed on someone else. Anyone else. But her hands were already moving, already trying to brush the sugar away from the papers, which only made it worse because now her fingerprints were on documents that probably detailed things people died for knowing about. "Stop." The voice came from the doorway, low, controlled, and absolutely lethal in its calmness. Evelyn froze, her fingers still touching the edge of a photograph, sugar stuck to her skin like evidence. She didn't turn around. Couldn't. Every survival instinct she'd honed over 3 years of working in this house screamed at her to stay perfectly still, to make herself as small as possible, to become the invisible girl she'd always been, the girl who cleaned rooms so thoroughly that no one remembered she'd been there, the girl who moved through hallways like a ghost, never making eye contact, never speaking unless spoken to, never, ever drawing attention. That girl was dead now, killed by a sugar bowl in her own clumsy hands. Turn around. It wasn't a request. Adrian Voss didn't make requests. He made statements that sounded like choices until you realized there was only ever one option: obedience. Evelyn turned slowly, keeping her eyes down. She'd seen Adrian before, of course. Glimpses as she cleaned hallways he walked through, brief moments when she'd been in a room he'd entered and she'd made herself invisible against the walls. But she'd never looked at him directly. Never had his attention focused on her like a spotlight she couldn't escape. She looked now. She had to. He stood in the doorway of his private office, 6 feet of controlled violence in a suit that probably cost more than she made in a year. Dark hair pushed back from a face that was handsome in the way that predators were beautiful, sharp angles and harder edges, with eyes so dark they looked black in the afternoon light streaming through the windows. He was 35. Maybe 36, young for the kind of power he wielded, which meant he'd climbed over bodies to get where he was. Those black eyes tracked over her now, taking inventory. Evelyn felt exposed in her maid's uniform, the simple black dress and white apron that marked her as part of the house, but not part of the world. Her dark hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it gave her headaches. Her hands were red from cleaning solutions. She was 24 years old and she'd never felt smaller. "Your name?" Adrian said. "Evelyn Park." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Voss. I was just—" The sugar bowl slipped, and I tried to clean it, but I made it worse, and I know I shouldn't have been near your desk, but I was dusting and— "How long have you worked here?" The question cut through her rambling. Evelyn swallowed. 3 years, sir. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or interest. It was gone too quickly to read. 3 years, he repeated, moving into the room with steps that were too quiet for a man his size. And I've never noticed you before. That was the point. That was the entire survival strategy. Don't be noticed, don't be remembered, don't be anything except a pair of hands that cleaned and a body that took up as little space as possible. I keep to myself, sir, Evelyn said, which was possibly the most obvious statement she'd ever made. Adrian circled his desk, looking at the sugar-covered documents. He picked up one of the photographs. A man in an expensive suit standing next to a shipping container, and studied it like the sugar crystals clinging to the edges were personally offensive. Then he set it down and looked at her again. Do you know what these papers are, Evelyn? She shook her head quickly. No, sir. I didn't read them. I wouldn't. But you saw them. Yes, but I didn't. I won't say anything. I don't talk to anyone. I'll forget everything I saw. The words tumbled out desperately. Please, I need this job. My mother, she's sick, and the medical bills. Your mother, Adrian interrupted, his voice still that terrible calm. What's wrong with her? The question caught Evelyn off guard. She'd expected threats, maybe violence, possibly the kind of disappearance that the men in those photographs had probably experienced. She hadn't expected interest. Stage 3 cancer, she heard herself say. Ovarian. The treatments are expensive and insurance doesn't cover everything, and I'm sending money home for… She stopped, realizing she was oversharing, giving information to a man who could use it as a weapon. I'm sorry, that's not relevant. It's relevant if it explains why you're working yourself to exhaustion, Adrian said, and there was something in his voice now that Evelyn couldn't identify. Not quite sympathy, not quite manipulation. Something in between. You're trembling. She was. Her whole body was shaking like she had a fever. Fear, adrenaline, exhaustion, all of it combining into a physical reaction she couldn't control. Adrian moved around the desk, and Evelyn's instinct was to back away, but she forced herself to stay still. Running would be worse. Running would activate whatever predator instincts drove a man like Adrian Voss. He stopped 2 feet away from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive that probably had a French name she couldn't pronounce. Close enough to kill her without breaking a sweat. Look at me, he said. Evelyn raised her eyes. It felt like the hardest thing she'd ever done. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were doing something she didn't understand, studying her, really seeing her, not as a maid or a mistake, but as a person. It was more unsettling than if he'd just fired her on the spot. You're not going to lose your job, Adrian said finally. Relief hit Evelyn so hard her knees almost buckled. Thank you, she breathed. Thank you so much. I promise I'll never… You're not going to lose your job, he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. Because you're not going to be a maid anymore. The relief evaporated, replaced by confusion and a new kind of fear. I don't understand. Starting tomorrow, you'll work directly for me, personal assistant. You'll be available whenever I need you, you'll handle tasks I assign you, and you'll be compensated accordingly. He named a salary that was triple what she currently made, enough to cover her mother's treatments, and then some. It sounded like a gift. It felt like a trap. Mr. Voss, I'm not qualified to… I'm not asking if you're qualified. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Adrian pulled a phone from his pocket, sleek, black, probably worth more than her car, and held it out. Take this. My number is already programmed. You'll be reachable at all times. Evelyn stared at the phone like it was a live grenade. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it, and she immediately wanted to take it back. You didn't question Adrian Voss. You didn't ask why when he gave you orders. You just obeyed and hoped you lived to see tomorrow. But instead of anger, something almost like amusement crossed his face. Because you've been invisible for 3 years, Evelyn, and the moment you became visible, you became interesting. Now take the phone. She took it. The metal was warm from his pocket, and it felt heavier than it should have. Go home, Adrian said, stepping back. Rest. Tomorrow morning, be here at 7. Someone will show you where my private office is. The real one, not this. He gestured at the room around them dismissively. Don't be late. Yes, sir. Evelyn backed toward the door, still holding the phone, her mind spinning with questions she didn't dare ask. When she reached the hallway, she finally turned and walked quickly toward the servants' stairs, her heart still racing. She didn't understand what had just happened. Didn't understand why Adrian Voss had looked at a clumsy maid who'd spilled sugar on his confidential files and decided to promote her instead of disappear her. Didn't understand what he wanted from her or why his eyes had looked at her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. But she understood one thing with absolute clarity. Her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to predict. And the man who'd changed it was the most dangerous person she'd ever met. The next morning arrived too quickly. Evelyn hadn't slept. She'd spent the night staring at the phone Adrian had given her, watching the screen light up twice with messages that just said 7 a.m. and don't forget. Like she could possibly forget. Like she could think about anything else. She'd stood in front of her tiny apartment's bathroom mirror for 30 minutes, trying to figure out what a personal assistant to a crime lord wore. The maid uniform was out. She'd been explicitly told her position had changed, but she didn't own anything remotely professional. Eventually, she'd settled on the only dress she had that wasn't for cleaning or sleeping, a simple black sheath she'd worn to her father's funeral 2 years ago. She paired it with the only heels she owned, which were half a size too small, and pinched her toes. The woman looking back at her in the mirror looked terrified. There was no hiding it, but at least she looked like she was trying. The mansion was different when she arrived at 6:45, or maybe it was the same and she was different. The grand foyer with its marble floors and crystal chandelier had always seemed impressive in an impersonal way, beautiful but untouchable, like a museum. Now it felt like the entrance to something dangerous. Ms. Park. Evelyn turned to find a woman in her 50s, dressed impeccably in a navy suit, watching her with an expression that gave nothing away. Not friendly, not hostile, just assessing. "I'm Patricia Nguyen, Mr. Voss's chief of staff. I'll be showing you to your new workspace and explaining your duties." Patricia's voice was crisp, efficient, with the faintest trace of an accent that suggested she'd been speaking English longer than she'd been alive, but it wasn't her first language. "Follow me, please." They walked through hallways Evelyn had cleaned 100 times, but instead of taking the servants' corridors, Patricia led her through the main house, past rooms with doors that were always closed, past artwork that was probably stolen from museums, past windows that looked out over gardens maintained by people Evelyn used to work alongside. "The rules are simple," Patricia said as they walked. "Mr. Voss values discretion above all else. What you see in his office, what you hear in his meetings, what you learn about his business, none of it leaves this building. You don't discuss it with other staff, you don't mention it to family or friends. You don't write it in a diary or text it to your mother. You simply don't speak about it. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." Mr. Voss also values punctuality. When he tells you to be somewhere at a specific time, you're there 5 minutes early. Not on time. Early. "Yes, ma'am." And finally, Mr. Voss values honesty. If you make a mistake, you tell him immediately. If you don't know something, you admit it. If you're uncomfortable with a task, you voice that concern. What he will not tolerate is deception or incompetence, disguised as confidence. They stopped in front of a door that looked identical to a dozen others, except this one had a numeric keypad instead of a traditional lock. Patricia entered a code, and the door clicked open. "This is Mr. Voss's private office," she said, gesturing Evelyn inside. "Your desk is there." The office was massive, easily 3 times the size of the room where Evelyn had spilled sugar yesterday. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, giving a view that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. The furniture was modern and minimal. A desk that looked like a single piece of carved black stone, leather chairs that resembled thrones, and built-in shelving that held books in languages Evelyn couldn't read. Her desk, apparently her desk now, sat in an alcove near the windows. Smaller than Adrian's, but still more substantial than anything she'd ever worked at. There was a computer already turned on and displaying a login screen, and a stack of files labeled with her name. "Your primary responsibility is managing Mr. Voss's schedule," Patricia continued, moving to the computer and logging in with practiced ease. "He has meetings throughout the day, some legitimate business, some less so. You'll coordinate with security, arrange transportation, prepare briefing documents, and ensure he has everything he needs. The calendar system is fairly intuitive, but I'll walk you through it." For the next 20 minutes, Patricia explained systems and protocols with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, multiple times. Evelyn tried to absorb it all, taking notes on a legal pad that appeared on her desk, but it felt like drinking from a fire hose. Questions? Patricia asked finally. Evelyn had about 1,000 questions, starting with, "Why me?" and ending with, "What happens if I mess up?" But before she could voice any of them, the door opened. Adrian Voss walked in, and the energy in the room shifted immediately. Patricia straightened almost imperceptibly. Evelyn's hand tightened around her pen. The air itself seemed to compress, like the space had to make room for him. He wore a different suit than yesterday, charcoal gray with a black shirt underneath, no tie. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd showered recently. His eyes went first to Patricia, then to Evelyn, and something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "Patricia," he said by way of greeting, "how's our new assistant doing?" "Adequately prepared," Patricia replied, which Evelyn suspected was high praise. "I've walked her through the basics. She'll need time to adjust to the systems." "She'll have it." Adrian moved to his desk, picking up a tablet and scrolling through something. "Clear my morning. I want 2 hours with Evelyn to go over expectations." Patricia's expression didn't change, but Evelyn felt like she'd missed something significant in the exchange. "Of course, sir. I've rescheduled your 10 o'clock to this afternoon." "Thank you, Patricia. That's all." It was a dismissal. Patricia gave a slight nod and left, the door closing behind her with a soft click that sounded unnaturally loud. And then it was just Evelyn and Adrian, alone in an office that suddenly felt much smaller than it had moments ago. "Sit down," Adrian said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs in front of his desk. Evelyn sat. The chair was more comfortable than it looked, which somehow made her more nervous. Adrian set down the tablet and leaned back, studying her with that same intense focus from yesterday, like he was trying to read her thoughts through her skull. "You didn't sleep last night," he observed. It wasn't a question, but Evelyn answered anyway. "No, sir." "Nervous?" "Terrified," she admitted, then immediately regretted the honesty. But Adrian had said he valued honesty, and Patricia had emphasized that rule. So maybe... Adrian smiled. It was small, barely a shift of his mouth, but it transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Overconfidence gets you killed." "That's not particularly comforting, sir." The smile widened fractionally. "I'm not here to comfort you, Evelyn. I'm here to use you." The bluntness of it stole her breath. Most people would have dressed it up, made it sound less predatory. But Adrian Voss apparently didn't believe in euphemisms. "Use me how?" she asked, proud that her voice didn't shake. "That depends on what you're capable of," Adrian said. He stood, moving around the desk to lean against it, arms crossed. The position put him closer to her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Tell me about yourself." "Not the resume version. The real version." Evelyn hesitated. The real version was messy, complicated, full of details she'd spent 3 years trying to bury under the facade of the invisible maid. "I don't know what you want to hear," she said finally. "Start with why you're working in my house, instead of pursuing whatever it was you actually wanted to do with your life." The observation hit harder than it should have. Evelyn looked away, focusing on the city view beyond the windows. Skyscrapers and smog and millions of people who weren't sitting in a crime lord's office trying to explain their life choices. "I wanted to be a teacher," she said quietly. "Elementary school. I was 2 years into my degree when my father died, and my mother got sick 6 months later. The medical bills..." She shrugged, the gesture inadequate for the weight of those decisions. "I dropped out, took the first job I could find that paid enough to help. That job was here. And you've been here ever since, invisible, unremarkable." Adrian's voice wasn't cruel, just factual. "Until yesterday." "Until yesterday," Evelyn agreed. "Do you know why I didn't fire you?" Adrian asked. "Or worse?" She met his eyes again. "No, sir. I've been trying to figure that out. Because everyone else in this house looks at me with either fear or calculation. They're afraid of what I'll do to them, or they're calculating what they can get from me. But you..." He tilted his head slightly, like she was a specimen under a microscope. "You looked at me with something else. Curiosity, maybe, or defiance." "I don't think I was defiant." "You asked why," Adrian interrupted. When I told you what was going to happen, you asked why. No one asks me why, Evelyn. They just obey and hope they survive the experience. But you wanted to understand. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that. She had asked why. It had been stupid and impulsive and potentially suicidal, but she'd done it anyway. I need people around me who can think, Adrian continued. Not just follow orders, but understand the reasons behind them. Patricia is excellent at executing plans, but she doesn't question the plans themselves. My security team is loyal and effective, but they're not strategists. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. You're smart enough to see patterns, but inexperienced enough that you haven't learned to hide what you're thinking. That makes you useful. Useful how? Evelyn asked again. We'll find out. Adrian pushed off from the desk and returned to his chair. For now, your job is to observe and learn. You'll sit in on meetings, take notes, and tell me what you notice. You'll review documents and flag anything that seems inconsistent or concerning. You'll interact with people who come through this office and report on their behavior. Think of yourself as my external processor. I need your perspective because you're not embedded in this world yet. You're still capable of being shocked by things that I've become numb to. It made sense, in a twisted way. An outsider's view could catch things that insiders missed, but it also meant Evelyn would be exposed to aspects of Adrian's business that probably should have stayed invisible to her. And if I see something that, she struggled for the right word, that I morally object to? Adrian's expression darkened, but not with anger, with something closer to respect. Then you tell me that you morally object to it. I might disagree with your assessment. I might do it anyway. But I want to know what you think. Why? The question escaped again, that dangerous curiosity. Because power without perspective is just tyranny, Adrian said simply. And I'm trying very hard not to become the monster everyone already thinks I am. The admission hung in the air between them, too honest and too revealing. Evelyn didn't know how to respond to it, didn't know if she was supposed to. The tablet on Adrian's desk buzzed. He glanced at it, and whatever he saw there made his jaw tighten. We have a problem, he said, standing. Come with me. Sir? Your education starts now, Evelyn. You wanted to understand? Pay attention. He strode toward the door, and Evelyn scrambled to follow, her two small heels clicking against polished floors as she tried to keep pace. They moved through the mansion quickly, descending stairs that led to levels Evelyn had never been allowed to access. Security nodded them through checkpoints. Doors unlocked at Adrian's approach. They ended up in what looked like a conference room, but darker, windowless, with a table surrounded by men who all looked like they'd killed people and would happily do it again. Adrian took the seat at the head of the table. Evelyn stood behind him, trying to make herself invisible again through sheer force of will. Report, Adrian said. One of the men, scarred face, military bearing, spoke first. Shipment was intercepted at the port. Feds got there before our people did. 3 containers seized, 2 drivers in custody. How did they know? Adrian's voice was dangerously quiet. We're investigating, but it looks like someone talked. Someone inside. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Evelyn felt it, that shift from tense to lethal. Find them, Adrian said. I want a name by end of day. Sir? The scarred man hesitated. There's more. Your brother called. Adrian's hand resting on the table curled into a fist. What did Marcus want? To remind you about dinner tomorrow night. Said it's important family business. Of course it is. Adrian's voice was acid. Tell Marcus I'll be there, and make sure our guest list is updated. I want eyes on everyone in that room. The meeting continued, moving through logistics and problems that Evelyn only half understood. Shipments and territories and names of people who were probably already dead but didn't know it yet. She took notes on the legal pad she'd brought, her hand moving automatically while her mind tried to process the reality of what she was witnessing. This wasn't business. This was war conducted in conference rooms instead of battlefields. When the meeting finally ended and the men filed out, Adrian remained seated, staring at the empty table like it held answers he couldn't find. Your thoughts, he said without looking at her. Evelyn swallowed. You have a traitor in your organization. Obviously. And you're going to kill them when you find them. Obviously. Your brother is either part of the problem or trying to exploit it for his own benefit. Now Adrian did look at her, something sharp and pleased in his eyes. Go on. He called about a family dinner, which you clearly don't want to attend, but he framed it as important family business. That's either a power play or a warning. Either way, he's using the situation to his advantage. Evelyn paused, then took a risk. You don't trust him. I don't trust anyone, Adrian corrected. But you're right that Marcus is a problem. He's been a problem since we were children, and he'll be a problem until one of us is dead. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Tomorrow night's dinner will be interesting. You'll attend with me. Evelyn blinked. Sir? You'll attend as my assistant. Take notes, observe the guests, and tell me later what you saw. Consider it part of your training. He started walking and Evelyn followed. We'll need to get you something appropriate to wear. Patricia will arrange it. They were back in the elevator, rising toward the main house, when Evelyn found her voice again. Mr. Voss, I don't think I'm qualified to... You're qualified to observe and report. That's all I'm asking. The elevator doors opened and Adrian stepped out. Go home, Evelyn. Rest. Tomorrow is going to be challenging for both of us. It was a dismissal, clear and final. Evelyn nodded and turned toward the exit, her mind already spinning with everything she'd learned and everything she still didn't understand. She was almost to the front door when Adrian's voice stopped her. Evelyn. She turned. He stood in the middle of the foyer, hands in his pockets, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. You did well today, he said. Better than I expected. The praise hit her like a physical thing, warm and unexpected. She didn't know what to do with it. Thank you, sir, she managed. Adrian nodded once, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the depths of his mansion like a king returning to his throne. Evelyn left, stepping out into afternoon sunlight that felt surreal after the darkness of the conference room. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't just fear. It was adrenaline, excitement, the terrible thrill of standing at the edge of something dangerous and choosing to lean forward instead of stepping back. She pulled out the phone Adrian had given her and saw a new message waiting. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. We're going into battle. AV. Evelyn stared at the message until the screen went dark, then slipped the phone back into her pocket and started walking toward her car. Her two small heels pinched her feet with every step, a reminder that she wasn't built for this world. But maybe, she thought, she could learn to be. The dress Patricia sent over was black, which Evelyn had expected, but the similarity to anything she'd ever worn ended there. It was silk that moved like water, with a neckline that was modest enough to be professional, but cut in a way that suggested she had a body under the fabric instead of just existing as a mobile coat hanger. The hem fell just above her knees, and when she turned in front of her apartment's cheap, full-length mirror, the fabric caught the light in ways that made her look like someone who belonged at expensive dinners instead of cleaning up after them. The shoes that came with it actually fit. Heels high enough to put her closer to Adrian's eye level, but stable enough that she wouldn't break an ankle trying to navigate marble floors. And there was jewelry, simple pearl earrings, and a thin gold bracelet that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Evelyn put it all on and barely recognized herself. The woman in the mirror looked competent, dangerous even, like she could walk into a room full of criminals and hold her own. The illusion lasted until she tried to leave her apartment and realized her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't get her key in the lock. You can do this, she whispered to herself, forcing her fingers to cooperate. It's just dinner. Observation and reporting, that's all. Except it wasn't just dinner, it was Adrian's brother, who was apparently either a traitor or an opportunist, or both. It was a room full of people who operated in the shadows of legality and wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatened their interests. It was Evelyn's first real test of whether she could survive in this world, or if yesterday's confidence had been nothing but adrenaline and delusion. The car Patricia had arranged arrived exactly on time. A black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who didn't speak just opened the door and waited for her to get in. They drove through the city as evening settled over everything, turning familiar streets into something strange and ominous. By the time they pulled up to the restaurant, a place called Meridian that Evelyn had only ever seen in magazine spreads about where the wealthy ate, her heart was trying to escape through her throat. Adrian was waiting outside, and the sight of him made everything else fade into background noise. He wore a suit that was probably illegal in several countries for what it did to the structural integrity of women's knees. Midnight blue, almost black, with a crisp white shirt and a tie that matched his eyes in a way that had to be intentional. His hair was styled back, making the sharp angles of his face even more pronounced. And when he saw her getting out of the car, something crossed his expression that Evelyn couldn't name but felt everywhere. "You clean up well," he said as she approached, and there was approval in his voice that made her stupid heart skip. "Patricia has good taste," Evelyn replied, keeping her voice steady through sheer willpower. "Patricia follows instructions." Adrian offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Evelyn took it. His forearm was solid under the expensive fabric, all controlled strength. "I told her to find something that would make you look like you belonged in rooms where people make decisions that affect thousands of lives." She delivered. They walked toward the entrance together, and Evelyn was hyper-aware of every eye that tracked their movement. The doorman who opened the door with a slight bow. The hostess whose professional smile faltered for half a second when she saw Adrian. The diners who glanced up from their meals and quickly looked away, like making eye contact might be fatal. "Your brother is already here," the hostess said, her voice carefully neutral. "Private dining room, as requested." "Of course he is," Adrian murmured. "Marcus does love to establish territorial advantage." They were led through the main dining room, all white tablecloths and crystal chandeliers, and the kind of quiet that came from people who were too wealthy to need to prove anything, and down a hallway to a door that probably cost more than Evelyn's car. The hostess opened it and stepped aside. The room beyond was smaller than Evelyn had expected, dominated by a table set for 8. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, the view probably worth more than the meal. And seated at the head of the table, like he owned not just the room but everything in it, was a man who looked enough like Adrian to be his twin, but different enough that the differences mattered. Marcus Voss was broader than his brother, built like someone who'd played football in college and never quite lost the bulk. His hair was lighter, more brown than black, and his eyes were blue where Adrian's were dark. He wore a suit that was expensive but slightly rumpled, like he'd been wearing it all day, and couldn't be bothered to care about the creases. When he smiled at them, it was all teeth and no warmth. "Adrian," he said, standing, "right on time. How unlike you." "I'm always on time, Marcus. You're just usually late." Adrian moved into the room, still holding Evelyn's arm. "This is Evelyn Park, my new assistant." Marcus's eyes slid to Evelyn, and she felt evaluated and dismissed in the space of 2 seconds. "Assistant," he repeated, making the word sound like something else entirely. "How progressive of you, brother. I thought you preferred your staff to be invisible." "Preferences change," Adrian said smoothly, pulling out a chair for Evelyn. She sat, grateful for something to do with her shaking hands. "Where's the rest of our party?" "Running late. Traffic, apparently." Marcus returned to his seat, picking up a wine glass that was already half empty. "We have time for a drink and a chat before business intrudes." "How unfortunate," Adrian murmured, taking the chair next to Evelyn. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this. A server appeared with wine, pouring for Adrian and Evelyn without asking if they wanted any. Evelyn took a sip and tried not to choke. Whatever it was, it tasted like money and grapes that had been personally blessed by French monks. "So, Evelyn," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair with the posture of someone completely at ease, "how are you finding your new position? I imagine it's quite different from scrubbing floors." The comment was designed to cut, and it did. Evelyn felt the sting of it, the reminder that she was an outsider here, a maid playing dress-up in clothes that didn't belong to her. But she'd spent 3 years making herself invisible, which meant she'd also spent 3 years listening to people talk when they thought no one was paying attention. She knew how to handle men who used words like weapons. "Very different," she agreed, meeting Marcus's eyes directly. "The floor scrubbing was honest work. This feels more like theater." Adrian made a sound that might have been a laugh, quickly disguised as clearing his throat. Marcus's smile tightened. "Theater," he repeated. "Interesting word choice." "Accurate word choice," Evelyn corrected. She could feel Adrian's attention on her, assessing, but she didn't look at him. Kept her focus on Marcus, who was watching her now with something closer to actual interest. Everyone performing their role, saying their lines, pretending the stage isn't held up by scaffolding that could collapse at any moment. "She's perceptive," Marcus said to Adrian, like Evelyn wasn't sitting right there. I can see why you hired her, although I have to wonder if perception is really what you're after. Meaning? Adrian's voice had gone cold. Meaning you've never brought anyone to a family dinner before? Not since... Marcus stopped, and something passed between the brothers, some history that Evelyn didn't have access to. Well, not in a very long time. The door opened before Adrian could respond, and 3 men entered. Evelyn recognized one of them from the conference room meeting, the scarred military type who'd reported about the intercepted shipment. The other 2 were strangers, but they carried themselves with the same predatory awareness that marked all of Adrian's associates. Dangerous men pretending to be civilized. Introductions were made. The scarred man was Carter, head of security. The other 2 were Vincent and Russo, who apparently handled logistics and financial operations respectively. Everyone shook hands and took seats, and the server reappeared with menus that didn't list prices because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford to eat here. Evelyn ordered something at random, not caring what it was, and focused on doing what Adrian had asked her to do. Observe. The conversation started professionally enough. Discussion of market conditions and shipping routes and regulatory changes that affected import costs. But underneath the business talk, there were currents running that had nothing to do with legitimate commerce. Vincent mentioned a delayed delivery, and Russo talked about unexpected expenses, and everyone at the table understood they were discussing things that would never appear on official ledgers. Marcus controlled the conversation like a conductor directing an orchestra, steering topics and cutting people off when they ventured too close to subjects he didn't want discussed. Adrian led him, participating when necessary but mostly watching, and Evelyn realized this was a game. Marcus thought he was running the meeting, but Adrian was letting him think that while gathering information from what wasn't being said. The shipment issue has been handled, Marcus said eventually, after the appetizers had been cleared away. We've identified the leak and addressed it. Addressed how? Adrian asked quietly. Permanently? Marcus took a drink of wine. The details aren't suitable for dinner conversation. And the drivers who were arrested? They don't know anything useful. Low-level contractors, hired through intermediaries. The feds can squeeze them all they want. They'll get nothing. Adrian nodded slowly, but Evelyn could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand tightened fractionally around his wine glass. He didn't believe Marcus. Or he believed him but didn't trust the solution. We should discuss expansion, Vincent said, clearly eager to move past the uncomfortable topic. The Eastern Territories are ready for... No, Adrian cut him off. We're not expanding east. But the profit margins... I said no. Adrian's voice dropped into a register that made everyone at the table go still. We maintain current operations, we shore up security, and we don't take on new risks while we're still dealing with federal attention. End of discussion. Marcus's smile was sharp enough to cut. Always so conservative, brother. Father would be disappointed. The temperature in the room plummeted. Carter shifted in his seat, hand moving unconsciously toward where Evelyn suspected he kept a weapon. Russo suddenly found his plate fascinating. Vincent looked like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. Father, Adrian said with a calm that was more terrifying than anger, is dead. And if you'd like to discuss his disappointments, we can start with his second son's complete inability to think more than 5 minutes into the future. Careful, Adrian. Or what? Adrian leaned forward slightly. You'll do what exactly? Stage another coup? Try to take control of operations you barely understand? Remind everyone at this table that the only reason you're still breathing is because your family and I have standards about killing relatives? Marcus's face flushed red, but before he could respond, Evelyn's phone buzzed in her clutch. She almost ignored it. Interrupting this conversation seemed like a great way to get killed, but the buzzing was insistent. 3 short bursts, which according to the protocols Patricia had explained meant emergency. Excuse me, she said quietly, pulling out the phone. The message was from Patricia. Security breach at the estate. Armed intruders. Police en route. Mr. Voss needs to know immediately. Evelyn's blood went cold. She looked at Adrian, who was still locked in a staring contest with his brother, and made a decision that might get her fired or might save his life. Mr. Voss, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. We have a problem. Adrian turned to her, and she held up the phone so he could see the message. His expression didn't change, but something happened behind his eyes. A shift from controlled anger to cold calculation. He stood smoothly, buttoning his suit jacket. "We're leaving." "Adrian, we're in the middle of—" Marcus started. "We're done." Adrian looked at Carter. "Call ahead to the estate. I want a full report by the time we arrive. Vincent, Russo, you're with me." He turned to Marcus last. "Thank you for dinner, brother. Always enlightening." Marcus's face was a mask of fury, but he didn't argue. Just watched as Adrian moved around the table, offering his hand to Evelyn. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet, and they left the private dining room with Carter and the others following. They moved through the restaurant quickly, drawing stairs but not stopping. And when they reached the front entrance, there were already 3 cars waiting. "Take my car," Adrian told Evelyn, handing her a key fob. "Carter will drive you. I need you somewhere safe while we handle this." "No," Evelyn said, surprising herself. "Evelyn, you said I was supposed to observe and report. I can't do that if I'm hiding in a car." She met his eyes, refusing to back down, even though every survival instinct screamed at her to obey. "Let me come with you." Adrian stared at her for a long moment, and Evelyn could see him weighing options, calculating risks. Then he nodded once. "Stay close to me. Do exactly what I say when I say it. Understood?" "Yes, sir." They got into the lead car, Adrian driving this time, with Evelyn in the passenger seat and Carter in the back. The engine roared to life, and then they were racing through city streets, weaving through traffic with a precision that suggested Adrian had done this before. Many times before. "Carter," Adrian said without taking his eyes off the road, "what are we looking at?" 4 intruders, heavily armed, entered through the east perimeter. Security engaged, 2 suspects down, 2 still active. They were trying to reach the main house. "Where's Patricia?" "Safe room with the household staff." "Good." Adrian took a corner hard enough that Evelyn had to brace herself against the door. "Have the police been told to stand down?" "Yes, sir. They're establishing a perimeter but not entering." "Make sure it stays that way. I don't need cops complicating this." They drove in silence after that, the city blurring past the windows. Evelyn's mind raced with questions she didn't dare ask. Who were the intruders? What did they want? And why did Adrian seem more angry than concerned, like this was an inconvenience rather than a crisis? The estate came into view, lit up like a Christmas tree with security lights. Police cars blocked the main gate, their lights painting everything in alternating red and blue. Adrian didn't slow down, just flashed his headlights in some kind of code, and the officers moved their vehicles to let them through. The driveway was chaos. Security personnel in tactical gear moved with military precision, weapons drawn, coordinating through earpieces. An ambulance was parked near the front entrance, paramedics working on someone Evelyn couldn't see. And there, on the steps leading to the main doors, were 2 bodies covered with white sheets that were slowly turning red. Adrian parked and was out of the car before the engine fully stopped. Evelyn followed, her heels crunching on gravel, trying not to look at the covered bodies and failing. "Report," Adrian demanded, approaching a man who looked like he commanded the security team. 2 suspects eliminated at point of entry. 2 more made it inside before we locked down. They're contained on the 2nd floor, west wing. "My office?" "Secured. They didn't get close." "What were they after?" The security commander hesitated. "We found this on one of the deceased." He held up a plastic evidence bag containing a photograph. Even from several feet away, Evelyn could see what it was. A picture of her. Not from today, but from weeks ago, in her maid uniform, carrying cleaning supplies down a hallway. The world tilted. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as understanding crashed over her like a wave. These people hadn't come for Adrian. They'd come for her. Adrian's face went absolutely blank, which Evelyn was learning meant he was furious beyond measure. He took the evidence bag, studying the photograph with eyes that had gone black and empty. "Where are the survivors?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of an execution order. "3rd floor study. We have them contained but not subdued. They're demanding to negotiate." "There's nothing to negotiate." Adrian handed the evidence bag back. "I'm going up there. Carter, you're with me. Everyone else, maintain perimeter." "Sir, that's not—" the commander started. "Not a discussion." Adrian turned to Evelyn. "You stay here, with guards. If anyone approaches you who isn't Patricia or one of my people, you scream. Understood?" Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice. Adrian studied her face for a moment, and then he did something that shocked her more than anything else that had happened tonight. He reached out and touched her cheek just briefly, his hand warm against her skin. "This isn't your fault," he said quietly, "but I'm going to make sure it never happens again." Then he was gone, moving into the house with Carter, leaving Evelyn standing in the driveway surrounded by armed guards and covered bodies, and the terrible knowledge that people had died tonight because someone wanted to get to her. Patricia appeared from somewhere, wrapped in a coat over her usual impeccable suit, her face pale but composed. "Come inside, Ms. Park. You shouldn't be out here." "Those people came for me," Evelyn heard herself say. "Why would anyone who would want—" "I don't know," Patricia said gently, guiding her toward a side entrance away from the bodies. "But Mr. Voss will find out. And when he does, there will be consequences." They went to a sitting room that Evelyn had cleaned 100 times but never actually sat in. Patricia poured her something amber from a crystal decanter, and Evelyn drank it without tasting it, the burn of alcohol barely registering against the numbness spreading through her chest. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt broken, unreliable. Patricia sat with her in silence, not offering empty comfort, just being present. Outside, security moved and police radios crackled, and somewhere in the house, Adrian was confronting armed intruders who'd come here with her photograph. When Adrian finally returned, his knuckles were bloody. Evelyn stood automatically, her body responding before her mind caught up. Adrian looked at her, and something in his expression made her throat tight. "It's handled," he said simply. "What does that mean?" "It means they won't be threatening you again, ever." He moved to the decanter, pouring himself a drink and downing it in one motion. "Carter, get me everything we can find on Daniel Morrison. Employment history, known associates, current location. I want it within the hour." Evelyn's heart stopped. "Daniel? What does he have to do with this?" Adrian's eyes cut to her. "You know that name." It wasn't a question. Evelyn sat back down, her legs suddenly unreliable. "He's my ex. We dated 2 years ago before I started working here. It ended badly." "How badly?" "Badly enough that I filed a restraining order. Badly enough that he told me if he couldn't have me, he'd make sure no one else could either." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm room. "But that was 2 years ago. He moved to another state. I thought he was gone." Adrian set down his glass with enough force that Evelyn was surprised it didn't shatter. "The men who came here tonight were hired by someone who gave them your photograph and instructions to bring you to a secondary location. They weren't here to kill you. They were here to take you." The implications of that crashed over Evelyn like ice water. Not a quick death, but something prolonged, something worse. "Oh," she whispered, because what else was there to say? "Daniel Morrison is currently in the city," Adrian continued, his voice hard. "Has been for 3 weeks, according to credit card records. He's been watching you." "How do you know that already?" "Because I pulled his file the day after you started working for me." Adrian sat down across from her, his bloodied hands resting on his knees. "I pull files on everyone who enters my immediate circle. It's not personal, it's practical. And when your file mentioned an ex-boyfriend with a restraining order and a history of escalating behavior, I flagged it." "You've been watching him?" "I've been aware of him. There's a difference." Adrian leaned forward, and Evelyn couldn't look away from his eyes, dark and intense and absolutely focused on her. "What I didn't anticipate was that he would be stupid enough to move against you while you were under my protection." "I didn't know I was under your protection." "You've been under my protection since the moment you spilled sugar on my desk," Adrian said flatly. "Everything in my sphere belongs to me, Evelyn. That includes you. And I protect what's mine." The possessiveness of it should have been terrifying, should have sent her running for the door, grabbing her mother, disappearing into a life where crime lords didn't claim ownership over people like they were property. But instead, Evelyn felt something else. Safety. For the first time since she'd seen that photograph in the evidence bag, her heart rate started to slow. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now, you move into the estate, guest wing, fully secured, your own space. You don't go anywhere without security. You don't meet with anyone I haven't vetted. And you absolutely don't go home to an apartment that Daniel Morrison has certainly been surveilling. I can't just move in here. You can and you will." Adrian's tone left no room for argument. Unless you'd prefer to take your chances with an ex-boyfriend who just sent armed mercenaries to kidnap you? Evelyn closed her eyes. When she opened them again, Adrian was still watching her with that unwavering focus. My mother, she said. She's in a care facility. If he knows where I live, he knows where she is. Already handled. I've had security stationed there since the breach was reported. She's safe. Adrian stood, buttoning his suit jacket despite the bloodstains on his knuckles. Patricia will show you to your rooms and provide everything you need. Try to sleep. Tomorrow we deal with Daniel Morrison. Deal with him how? Adrian's smile was cold enough to freeze blood. However I decide is appropriate. He left, and Evelyn sat in the sitting room, staring at the empty doorway and trying to process the fact that her life had just changed again. Not gradually this time, but violently, with armed intruders and covered bodies, and a man who'd declared her his property in a tone that suggested he'd burn the city down to keep her safe. Patricia cleared her throat gently. Shall I show you to your rooms, Ms. Park? Evelyn nodded and stood on shaking legs. They walked through hallways she knew from cleaning them, but everything looked different now. The paintings on the walls weren't just decoration, they were worth more than most people made in a lifetime. The antique furniture wasn't just old, it was chosen specifically to project power and taste. And the security cameras in every corner weren't just for show, they were recording everything, protecting everyone Adrian considered his. The guest wing was on the third floor, far from where the intruders had been contained. Patricia opened a door to reveal a suite that was bigger than Evelyn's entire apartment. Bedroom, sitting area, private bathroom, with a tub that could fit 3 people. Windows that looked out over gardens lit by strategically placed lights. Furniture that was both beautiful and functional, designed for comfort rather than impression. Your belongings from your apartment will be collected and brought here tomorrow, Patricia said, moving through the space and checking that everything was in order. In the meantime, there are clothes in the closet that should fit, toiletries in the bathroom, and a phone on the nightstand that connects directly to security if you need anything. Patricia, Evelyn said quietly, thank you, for earlier, for sitting with me. The older woman's expression softened slightly. Mr. Voss values loyalty, Miss Park, and he's chosen to extend his protection to you. That means you're family now, whether you understand what that means yet or not. I'm not sure I do understand. You will. Patricia moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I've worked for Adrian Voss for 15 years. I've seen him make many decisions, some of them questionable, but I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you tonight when he saw that photograph. Whatever this is between you two, it's more than just business. She left before Evelyn could respond, pulling the door closed with a soft click. Evelyn stood in the middle of her new bedroom, still wearing the dress Patricia had chosen, still feeling the ghost of Adrian's hand against her cheek, still processing the fact that people had died tonight, and it was somehow connected to her simply existing in Adrian Voss's world. She walked to the window and looked out at the gardens, at the security personnel patrolling the grounds, at the lights of the city beyond the estate walls. Somewhere out there, Daniel was planning his next move, not realizing that he'd made the worst mistake of his life by threatening something Adrian considered his. And Evelyn, the invisible girl who'd spent 3 years trying not to be noticed, was standing in the eye of a hurricane, knowing that when the storm finally hit, there would be nothing left of the life she'd known before. Her phone, the one Adrian had given her, buzzed with a message. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow we go to war. AV. Evelyn read it 3 times, then set the phone down and started removing the pearl earrings. Tomorrow they'd go to war. Tonight, she'd try to rest in a room that cost more than her yearly salary, protected by men with guns, claimed by a crime lord who looked at her like she was something worth killing for. She should have been terrified. Part of her was. But another part, a part she didn't entirely recognize, felt something else. Anticipation. Because for the first time in her life, Evelyn Park wasn't invisible. She was seen. And the man who saw her was willing to burn the world down to keep her safe. Sleep never came. Evelyn lay in the massive bed, staring at shadows on the ceiling, listening to footsteps in the hallway that she knew were security, but that still made her pulse spike every time. At 4 a.m, she gave up pretending and took a shower that lasted until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the image of those covered bodies on the steps. By 6, she was dressed in clothes from the closet Patricia had mentioned, dark jeans that actually fit, a cream-colored sweater that was softer than anything she'd ever owned, boots that were broken in enough to be comfortable. She looked like someone who belonged in this world, even if she didn't feel like it. The phone Adrian had given her buzzed at 6:30. Conference room, 20 minutes. Bring coffee. AV Evelyn found her way to the kitchen, where staff were already preparing breakfast. They looked at her differently now, not with the casual dismissal she'd gotten as a maid, but with something closer to wariness. News traveled fast in a house like this. Everyone knew what had happened last night. Everyone knew she was the reason. She made 2 cups of coffee, one black for Adrian, one with cream for herself because she needed something to do with her hands, and headed toward the conference room she remembered from that first meeting. The one in the basement levels where men discussed shipments and territories and people who needed to disappear. Adrian was already there, standing at the head of the table, studying a laptop screen with an intensity that made the air feel charged. He changed from last night's suit into dark slacks and a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that were corded with muscle, and Evelyn noticed with a jolt still marked with dried blood on his knuckles. He looked like he'd slept even less than she had. "Coffee?" she said, setting his cup on the table. "Thank you." Adrian didn't look up from the screen. "Carter will be here in 5 minutes with an update. Sit." Evelyn sat in the chair next to his, close enough to see what he was looking at. Security footage, she realized. The estate grounds from multiple angles, time-stamped from last night. Adrian was watching the intruders approach, backing it up and replaying it, looking for something she couldn't identify. "There," he said finally, freezing the image. "Right there. See how the second one hesitates before entering? He didn't want to be here." Evelyn leaned closer, studying the grainy figure on screen. "How can you tell?" "Body language. The others move with purpose. This one looks back twice, checks his weapon 3 times, wipes his palm on his pants." Adrian's finger traced the movement on screen. "He's nervous, which means he's either new to this kind of work or he knows exactly how bad an idea it is to attack my home." Does it matter? It matters because nervous people make mistakes. And one of those mistakes might tell us who hired them. Adrian closed the laptop as the door opened and Carter walked in, carrying a tablet and looking like he'd spent the night doing exactly what Evelyn suspected, hunting for information. "Report," Adrian said, the word clipped and commanding. Carter set the tablet on the table, and Evelyn saw it was displaying a file with Daniel's photograph at the top. Seeing his face again after 2 years hit harder than she'd expected. The familiar features that had once made her heart race now just made her stomach turn. "Daniel Morrison, 32, currently unemployed," Carter began. "Lost his job at a tech startup 6 months ago, burned through his savings, started making increasingly desperate financial decisions. He's racked up $30,000 in debt across various credit cards and took out a loan from a private lending service that's definitely a front for organized crime." "Which organization?" Adrian asked. "The Kozlov family." Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Not quite surprised, but close. "Victor Kozlov is lending money to desperate ex-boyfriends now? That's beneath his usual operations." Morrison didn't borrow from Victor directly. He went through one of the street-level operations, probably didn't even realize who he was dealing with until the interest started compounding. Carter swiped to another screen. "But here's where it gets interesting. Morrison's debt was purchased 3 weeks ago by an unnamed buyer. The sale was processed through a shell company that took us most of the night to trace, but we finally found the actual owner." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Marcus." Evelyn's head snapped up. "Your brother bought Daniel's debt?" "My brother," Adrian said, his voice cold enough to frost glass, "has apparently decided that subtlety is no longer necessary." He looked at Carter. "Where's Morrison now?" "We tracked him to a motel on the east side. Low rent, cash only, the kind of place that doesn't ask questions. We have eyes on him, but he hasn't moved since he checked in last night." "He's waiting for instructions," Adrian said. "Marcus told him the attack would work, promised him something in exchange for going after Evelyn. When it failed, Morrison probably went into hiding, hoping Marcus would fix it." "Why would Marcus do this?" Evelyn asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "What does he gain from having me kidnapped?" Adrian looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her chest tight. "Leverage. Marcus has been trying to take control of family operations since our father died. He can't do it through force because I have the loyalty of everyone who matters. He can't do it through legal means because the business structure doesn't allow for it. So he's trying to do it through pressure points. You became one of those pressure points the moment I brought you to that dinner. Because you brought your assistant to a family meeting, Evelyn said slowly, understanding dawning, which suggested I was more than just an assistant. Marcus isn't subtle, but he's not stupid. He saw how I looked at you, how I reacted when he tried to dismiss you. He recognized it for what it was. And what was it? The question came out before Evelyn could stop it, too direct, too personal for a conversation that was supposed to be about strategy. Adrian held her gaze for a long moment. A weakness he thought he could exploit. The admission hung between them, heavy with implications. Evelyn wanted to ask what he meant by that, wanted to understand what exactly she was to Adrian Voss beyond an employee or a responsibility. But Carter was still standing there, waiting, and the tablet still showed Daniel's face, and there were bigger problems to solve. "What's the plan?" she asked instead. "We collect Morrison," Adrian said, turning back to Carter. Quietly. No police, no public confrontation. I want him brought here, and I want it done in a way that doesn't alert Marcus that we know about his involvement. "And then?" Carter asked. "Then Morrison and I are going to have a conversation about the choices he's made and the consequences he's about to face." Adrian's voice was soft, which somehow made it more terrifying. "After that, we deal with my brother." "Sir, if you move against Marcus directly, I'm not moving against him directly. Not yet." Adrian stood, rolling his shoulders like he was preparing for a fight. "But I'm going to make it very clear that Evelyn is off limits. To him, to Morrison, to anyone else who thinks they can use her to get to me." "How?" Evelyn asked. Adrian looked at her and she saw calculation in his eyes, strategy forming. "There's a charity gala tonight. Annual event. All of the city's elite, the kind of party where deals are made and alliances are formed. Marcus will be there. Everyone who matters will be there. And you're going to be there with me, wearing something that makes it impossible for anyone to miss you, standing at my side like you belong there. Which you do." "You want to make a statement," Evelyn said. "I want to make it clear that you're under my protection, that anyone who touches you answers to me, that Marcus's little gambit didn't work, and he's lost whatever advantage he thought he'd gained." Adrian moved closer, and Evelyn had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Can you do that? Walk into a room full of people who'll be evaluating every move you make, judging whether you're worthy of standing next to me?" 2 days ago, Evelyn would have said no. 2 days ago, she'd been the invisible maid who kept her head down and her mouth shut. But that woman had died the moment sugar spilled across confidential files. And the person who'd emerged from those ruins was still figuring out who she was, but knew one thing with certainty. She was tired of being afraid. "Yes," she said, "I can do that." Something like approval flickered across Adrian's face. "Good. Patricia will handle your dress and preparation. I need you ready by 7. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to have that conversation with Morrison." Adrian picked up his coffee, draining it in one long drink. "Carter, let's move. I want him here within the hour." They left, and Evelyn sat alone in the conference room, staring at Daniel's photograph on the abandoned tablet. She should have felt something, fear maybe, or vindication that he was finally going to face consequences for his actions. But all she felt was exhausted. Exhausted from not sleeping, from having her life upended twice in as many days, from the constant adrenaline that came with existing in Adrian's orbit. Her phone buzzed. Patricia, summoning her to the 3rd floor for what the message called preparation. Evelyn stood, left the conference room, and tried not to think about what Adrian meant by conversation, or what Daniel would look like when it was over. Patricia's idea of preparation turned out to involve 3 other women, none of whom Evelyn recognized, and a rolling rack of dresses that looked like they'd been borrowed from a fashion magazine. For the next 4 hours, Evelyn was primped and polished and transformed into someone she barely recognized. Hair styled in loose waves that looked effortless, but had taken an hour to achieve. Makeup that was subtle but dramatic, emphasizing her eyes and cheekbones in ways that made her look older, more sophisticated. Nails painted a deep red that matched the dress Patricia eventually selected. A floor-length gown in crimson silk that hugged every curve, and made Evelyn look dangerous. "You look like you could run an empire," one of the women said as they stepped back to evaluate their work. "Or burn one down," another added with a slight smile. Patricia dismissed them and studied Evelyn with an assessing eye. "How do you feel?" "Like I'm wearing armor," Evelyn admitted. "Good. That's exactly what this is." Patricia adjusted the neckline slightly, making sure it sat perfectly. "Tonight, you're not Evelyn Park, former maid. You're not even Evelyn Park, Adrian's assistant. You're the woman who survived an attack on his estate and emerged stronger. You're the woman he's chosen to stand beside him at the most important social event of the season. Every eye will be on you, every conversation will be about you, and you need to act like you expected nothing less." "No pressure, then." Patricia's lips twitched with something that might have been amusement. "You have better instincts than you give yourself credit for. Trust them. And trust Mr. Voss. He wouldn't put you in this position if he didn't believe you could handle it." There was a knock on the door, and Patricia opened it to reveal Carter, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was probably required for the gala. "Mr. Voss requests Miss Park's presence in his office. Immediately." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Is something wrong?" "He didn't say, ma'am, just that you should come now." She followed Carter through the mansion, the dress whispering against marble floors, her heart rate climbing with each step. When they reached Adrian's office, the real one, the one she'd been working from, the door was already open. Adrian stood by the windows, looking out at the city, his hands in his pockets. He'd changed into a tuxedo that probably violated several laws regarding how good a man was allowed to look, and when he turned at her entrance, something crossed his face that made her breath catch. "Leave us," he told Carter without taking his eyes off Evelyn. The door closed. They were alone. "Did you talk to Daniel?" Evelyn asked, breaking the silence that stretched between them. "I did." Adrian's voice was neutral, giving nothing away. "Is he alive?" "For now. Whether he stays that way depends on several factors, most of which are outside his control." Adrian moved away from the window, crossing the distance between them until he stood close enough that Evelyn could smell his cologne. Something different tonight, darker, more complex. He confirmed that Marcus approached him 3 weeks ago with an offer, $50,000, and help disappearing if he could deliver you to a specific location. Evelyn's hands curled into fists, crushing the silk of her dress. "And he agreed." "He agreed because Marcus told him that you'd moved on, that you were sleeping with your boss, that you'd forgotten all about him while he was struggling. Marcus played on Morrison's jealousy and desperation, turned him into a weapon, and pointed him at you." "That's not an excuse." "No," Adrian agreed. "It's not. Morrison made his choice. He hired those men, gave them your photograph, planned your abduction. The fact that he was manipulated doesn't absolve him of responsibility." "What are you going to do with him?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, studying her face like he was trying to read her thoughts. "What do you want me to do with him?" The question caught Evelyn off guard. She'd expected Adrian to make this decision on his own, to handle Daniel the way he handled every other problem, with swift, brutal efficiency. She hadn't expected to be given a choice. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Part of me wants him to suffer, to feel even a fraction of the fear he tried to inflict on me. But another part just wants him gone, erased, so far away that I never have to think about him again." "Both are possible." "I know." Evelyn met Adrian's eyes. "What would you do if I wasn't involved, if this was just business?" "If this was just business, Morrison would already be dead. He attacked my home, threatened my people, worked with my enemy. That's 3 death sentences." Adrian's hand came up, his fingers brushing her cheek in an echo of last night's touch. "But you are involved, and what I want doesn't matter as much as what you need." Evelyn leaned into the touch before she could stop herself, her eyes closing briefly. When she opened them again, Adrian was watching her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Make him disappear," she whispered. "Not dead. Just gone. Somewhere he can't come back from, can't hurt anyone else. Let him live with the consequences of his choices, but take away his ability to make them about me." Adrian nodded slowly. "Consider it done." His hand dropped from her face, and Evelyn immediately missed the warmth of it. "There's something else. Marcus will be at the gala tonight, and he'll make some kind of move. He has to. His plan failed, his involvement is exposed, and he needs to either double down or retreat. Based on everything I know about my brother, he'll double down. What kind of move? Public, designed to embarrass me or undermine my authority, or both. He'll try to expose some weakness, probably related to you. Adrian's jaw tightened. I need you to be prepared for whatever he says. He'll try to make you feel small, insignificant, like you don't belong in my world. He might reference your past as a maid, might suggest that our relationship is inappropriate or transactional, and he'll do it in front of people who matter, people whose opinions shape the social and business landscape of this city. And you want me to what exactly? Smile and ignore it? I want you to stand there and let him hang himself with his own words, Adrian said. Because while he's busy trying to tear you down, I'm going to be making it very clear what happens to people who threaten what's mine. But I need you to hold steady. Can you do that? Evelyn thought about the last 2 days. The sugar bowl, the conference room, the bodies on the steps, the photograph in the evidence bag. She thought about every time in her life she'd made herself invisible to survive. Every moment she'd swallowed her words and bent her head and disappeared into the background. And she thought about the woman in the mirror upstairs, the one in the red dress who looked like she could burn empires down. Yes, she said, I can do that. Adrian's smile was sharp and dangerous and full of promise. Then let's go make an entrance. The gala was being held at the Ashworth Museum, a massive building downtown that usually housed classical art, but had been transformed for tonight into something out of a fever dream. Ice sculptures, crystal chandeliers, flowers that probably cost more than Evelyn's car arranged in displays that looked like they'd been designed by someone with too much money and not enough sense. People in tuxedos and gowns worth more than she used to make in a year stood in clusters, drinking champagne and talking in the careful way that powerful people did when they were simultaneously making deals and pretending they weren't. Adrian's arrival was noticed immediately. Conversations paused, heads turned, and when Evelyn stepped out of the car, in her red dress, taking Adrian's offered arm, the whispers started. Ignore them, Adrian murmured as they walked up the steps toward the entrance. They're not important. But they were important, at least in terms of the social ecosystem Adrian navigated. These were the people who funded campaigns and sat on corporate boards and decided which businesses thrived and which ones mysteriously failed. These were the people whose opinions could make or break reputations with a single well-placed comment. Inside, the museum's main gallery had been cleared of art and filled with round tables draped in white cloth. A string quartet played something classical in the corner. Servers moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and appetizers that were more art than food. And at the far end of the room, standing near what looked like the main stage, was Marcus Voss. He saw them immediately. Evelyn watched his expression shift from surprise to calculation to something ugly and satisfied. He'd been waiting for this. Here we go, Adrian said quietly, and they moved into the crowd. The next 30 minutes were a masterclass in social warfare. Adrian introduced Evelyn to Mayor's wife, the district attorney, the CEO of the city's largest bank, and at least a dozen other people whose names she forgot immediately, but whose power she could feel in every handshake and measured smile. Each introduction was deliberate, each conversation carefully steered to establish that Evelyn wasn't just Adrian's assistant, but someone who belonged in these circles, someone who mattered. And through it all, Evelyn could feel Marcus watching, waiting for his moment. It came during dinner after they'd been seated at Adrian's usual table, front and center, positioned to see and be seen. Marcus approached with the woman on his arm, blonde and beautiful, and wearing a dress that cost more than a car. Adrian, Marcus said, his smile wide and false, what a surprise to see you here. I thought after last night's excitement you might stay home. And miss the social event of the season? Never. Adrian's tone was pleasant, but Evelyn could feel the tension in him, coiled and ready. Marcus, I don't believe you've formally met Evelyn Park. Evelyn, my brother Marcus and his companion. Stephanie, the blonde supplied, looking between the brothers with the expression of someone who knew she'd walked into a minefield. Lovely to meet you, Evelyn said, extending her hand. Stephanie shook it, but Marcus just stared, his eyes raking over Evelyn in a way that made her skin crawl. So this is the famous Evelyn, Marcus said, the maid who became an assistant. Quite the Cinderella story, isn't it? Though I suppose in this version the prince is more of a... Careful, Marcus, Adrian interrupted, his voice dropping into that dangerous register. Choose your next words very carefully. I'm just saying it's an unconventional arrangement. A woman who was cleaning your floors 2 weeks ago is now sitting at your table, wearing a dress that costs more than she used to make in 6 months, attending a gala with the city's elite. People are going to wonder about the nature of your relationship. They're going to ask questions. Let them ask, Adrian said calmly. Evelyn works for me because she's intelligent, observant, and loyal. Qualities that are apparently in short supply among family members. The jab landed. Marcus's face flushed red, but he recovered quickly, that fake smile sliding back into place. Of course. I'm sure her employment is purely professional. Though I have to wonder, Adrian, if it's wise to mix business with whatever this is, especially given recent events. I heard there was some trouble at the estate last night. Something about intruders? Marcus's eyes slid to Evelyn, cold and calculating. I do hope you weren't hurt, my dear. It must have been terrifying. I survived, Evelyn said, keeping her voice level despite the rage building in her chest. Thanks to your brother's quick response and excellent security. Yes, Adrian has always been good at protecting his assets, though I wonder if sometimes his protective instincts cloud his judgment, make him vulnerable to manipulation. The only manipulation I'm vulnerable to, Adrian said, standing slowly, is the kind perpetrated by family members who think they can use innocent people as weapons in whatever petty power struggle they've convinced themselves is important. The table went quiet. Stephanie looked like she wanted to disappear. Marcus's smile had frozen into something more like a snarl. I don't know what you're implying, Marcus said. Then let me be clear. Adrian's voice carried, drawing attention from nearby tables. I know about the debt purchase. I know about the offer you made to Daniel Morrison. I know that you orchestrated last night's attack, hoping to either eliminate or compromise Evelyn in order to gain leverage over me. What you apparently didn't know is that I have security protocols specifically designed to prevent exactly this kind of stupidity. And what you definitely didn't anticipate is that I would be willing to burn every bridge we have left rather than let you think for 1 second that your plan worked. The color drained from Marcus's face. Around them, conversations had stopped. People were staring now, no longer pretending to be polite. You're making a scene, Marcus hissed. I'm making a statement. There's a difference. Adrian took Evelyn's hand, pulling her to her feet beside him. Evelyn Park is under my protection. She has my complete trust, my total support, and access to resources that make her untouchable. Anyone who moves against her moves against me. Anyone who threatens her faces consequences that I will personally ensure are both immediate and permanent. And if my own brother thinks he can use her as a pawn in his sad little quest for power, he's about to learn exactly how wrong he is. The room was dead silent. Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of 100 stares, could sense the shift in the social atmosphere as people recalculated their understanding of who she was and what she meant to Adrian Voss. Marcus looked like he wanted to commit murder right there in the museum gallery. You'll regret this, Adrian. The only thing I regret is not cutting you out of the family business years ago when you first started becoming a liability. Adrian's hand tightened on Evelyn's. Consider this your final warning. Stay away from Evelyn. Stay away from my operations. And if you ever try something like this again, blood relation won't save you. He turned, pulling Evelyn with him, and they walked out of the gala together. Every eye followed their exit. Every mouth would be talking about this tomorrow. Adrian had just declared war on his own brother in front of the city's elite, and he'd done it to protect her. The car was waiting outside, engine running. They got in, and Adrian gave the driver an address that Evelyn didn't recognize. Then he sat back, loosened his tie, and closed his eyes. I'm sorry, Evelyn said into the silence. Adrian's eyes opened. For what? For being the reason you just nuked your relationship with your brother in front of everyone who matters. Marcus nuked that relationship the moment he went after you. I just made sure everyone knew it. Adrian turned to look at her, and there was something in his expression that made her chest tight. Do you understand what I did back there, Evelyn? You made a statement. You protected your asset. No. Adrian shifted closer, and suddenly the car felt much smaller. I told every person in that room that you matter to me, not as an employee, not as a responsibility, as something more. Something important enough that I'm willing to fracture my own family to keep you safe. Do you understand the implications of that? Evelyn's mouth had gone dry. I think so. Then say it. Tell me what you think is happening here. Her heart was racing now, adrenaline and something else flooding her system. You care about me. More than you should. More than is professional or smart or probably safe for either of us. And? Adrian's hand came up, fingers threading through her hair in a gesture that was possessive and gentle all at once. How do you feel about that? Terrified, Evelyn admitted, because everything in my life before you was about being invisible, being safe, not making waves. And now I'm in the middle of the ocean in a hurricane, and you're the only thing keeping me from drowning. And I don't know if that's salvation or just a different kind of danger. It's both, Adrian said honestly. Being with me will never be safe, Evelyn. My world doesn't allow for safe. But I can promise you that as long as you're in it, no one will hurt you without going through me first. And I can promise that I will never ask you to be invisible again. What if I want to be? What if this is too much? Then you tell me, and I'll arrange for you to disappear. New city, new identity, enough money to take care of your mother and yourself for the rest of your lives. You'll be safe, and you'll be free. And I'll make sure no one ever finds you. Adrian's thumb traced her cheekbone. But you'll be alone, and I'll have lost something I didn't know I needed until I saw you standing in my office covered in sugar, looking at me like I was a problem you were trying to solve instead of a monster you should run from. Evelyn leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. I don't want to disappear. Then don't. Adrian's voice was rough. Stay. Stand beside me. Let me protect you while you figure out who you are in this world. And when you're ready, when you've seen enough to make an informed choice, decide if this is something you want or something you're just enduring. And if I decide I want it? Adrian's smile was sharp and hungry and full of dark promise. Then we'll burn the world down together. The car stopped. Evelyn opened her eyes and realized they were back at the estate, the mansion lit up against the night sky like a castle in a fairy tale. Except this wasn't a fairy tale. This was real life, with real consequences and real danger, and a man who'd just declared in front of the city's elite that she was his to protect. Adrian got out first, then offered his hand to help her from the car. When she took it, he pulled her close enough that she could feel the heat of him through the silk of her dress. You did well tonight, he said quietly. Better than well. You stood there while my brother tried to tear you down, and you didn't flinch. You're stronger than you think you are, Evelyn Park. I'm terrified, she admitted again. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Adrian's hand came up to cup her face, and Evelyn's breath caught. But don't let it control you. Use it, channel it, let it make you dangerous instead of helpless. Then he stepped back, putting distance between them that felt like a loss. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow we deal with the fallout from tonight, and it's going to be ugly. Marcus won't take this lying down. What will he do? Whatever he can to hurt me through you, which is why security around you just tripled, and why you're not leaving this estate without armed guards until I'm certain he's not planning something worse than kidnapping. Adrian turned toward the house. Sleep, Evelyn. We've got a war to win, and I need you sharp. He left her standing in the driveway, the night air cold against her skin, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. She touched her face where his hand had been and tried to make sense of feelings she didn't have names for yet. Somewhere in the city, Marcus was planning his next move. Somewhere else, Daniel was learning what it meant to cross Adrian Voss. And here, in the center of it all, Evelyn was trying to figure out if she was falling in love with the man who'd claimed her as his, or if she was just addicted to the safety his protection provided. Either way, there was no going back. The invisible girl was dead. What had emerged in her place was still taking shape, still learning to navigate a world of violence and power and men who destroyed anyone who threatened what they considered theirs. But for the first time in her life, Evelyn wasn't afraid of being seen. She was afraid of disappearing again. The fallout came faster than Evelyn expected. By morning, her phone was flooded with notifications. Social media posts about the gala, gossip columns speculating about her relationship with Adrian, think pieces about power dynamics in modern relationships. Someone had leaked a photo of them leaving together, Adrian's hand on the small of her back, Evelyn looking up at him with an expression that was too raw, too honest for public consumption. The headline read, "Mystery Woman Causes Rift in Voss Empire." She was staring at the photo, coffee growing cold in her hand when Patricia knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "Mr. Voss wants you in his office, now." Patricia's expression was unreadable, which Evelyn had learned meant things were either very bad or very complicated. "And he said to tell you not to read the news." "Too late," Evelyn said, holding up her phone. "Of course." Patricia's lips thinned. "Come. He's been on calls since 5 this morning, and his mood is deteriorating." They walked through hallways that felt different in daylight, less imposing, more familiar. Evelyn had been living in the estate for 3 days now, and parts of it were starting to feel less like a museum and more like a place where people actually existed. The staff nodded at her when she passed. Security acknowledged her presence. She was becoming part of the landscape instead of an anomaly in it. Adrian's office door was open, and the sound of his voice carried into the hallway, cold, controlled, and absolutely lethal. "I don't care what the board thinks, Vincent. They don't make decisions about my personal life, and they sure as hell don't get to question who I bring to public events." A pause. "Then tell them they can take their concerns and shove them somewhere anatomically uncomfortable. I'll be at the meeting this afternoon, and we can discuss their objections in person." He hung up as Evelyn entered, tossing his phone onto the desk with enough force that she was surprised it didn't shatter. He'd been awake for hours. She could see it in the tension around his eyes, the way his jaw was locked tight. But he was dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her mother's monthly care facility bill. "You look like you've had a pleasant morning," Evelyn said, closing the door behind her. Adrian's laugh was sharp and humorless. "The board of directors is concerned that my dramatic display last night might affect shareholder confidence. My legitimate business partners are worried about negative publicity. And Marcus has apparently spent the night calling every contact we have in common, spinning the narrative that I've lost my mind over a woman I barely know." "Have you?" The question escaped before Evelyn could stop it. "Lost your mind?" Adrian looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. "Probably. Definitely. I'm not sure I care." He moved to the windows, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight with stress. Evelyn joined him, standing close enough that she could see their reflections in the glass. Two people who didn't quite fit together, who probably shouldn't work, but somehow did anyway. "My father used to say that emotions were liabilities in this business," Adrian said quietly. "That caring about people made you weak, gave your enemies targets. He built an empire on that philosophy, and it kept him alive for 63 years before his own paranoia drove him to a heart attack in this very office." "That's bleak. It's honest. My father died alone, surrounded by people who feared him but didn't give a damn about him as a person. And I swore I wouldn't end up like that. But I also understood the logic behind his rules." Adrian turned to look at her. "Then you spilled sugar on my desk, and suddenly the rules didn't seem as important as they used to." Evelyn's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. "Adrian, Marcus is planning something," he interrupted, clearly uncomfortable with the vulnerability he'd just shown. "Carter intercepted communications last night. My brother is meeting with the Kozlov family today, which means he's either trying to form an alliance against me, or he's negotiating for resources to fund whatever his next move is." "The Kozlovs," Evelyn said, remembering the name from the briefing about Daniel's debt. "Aren't they the ones who originally lent Daniel money?" "They are. And Viktor Kozlov has been trying to expand into my territories for years. If Marcus offers him access in exchange for support, we have a much bigger problem than family drama." Adrian pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "I have a meeting with my board this afternoon, which I can't miss without making their concerns worse. But I need eyes on Marcus's meeting with Victor, someone who can observe without being obvious, someone they wouldn't expect." Understanding dawned. "You want me to spy on them?" "I want you to sit in a cafe across from their meeting location and watch. Carter will give you surveillance equipment. Nothing complicated, just a camera and audio feed. You'll look like you're working on a laptop. They'll think nothing of it, and we'll get intel on what Marcus is planning." "And if they notice me?" "They won't. Victor has never met you, and Marcus thinks you're too shaken from the gala to be useful. He's underestimating you, which is his first mistake." Adrian moved closer, close enough that Evelyn could smell his cologne and see the flecks of lighter color in his dark eyes. But I need to know you're comfortable with this. I'm asking you to put yourself in proximity to dangerous people, and if you'd rather sit this out, I'll do it, Evelyn said. When? 2 hours. Carter will brief you on the equipment and protocols. Adrian's hand came up, his fingers brushing her jaw in a touch that was becoming familiar. Thank you. For what? For trusting me enough to walk into danger when you could very reasonably tell me to handle my own family problems. Evelyn caught his hand before he could pull away, holding it against her face. Your family problems became my problems the moment Marcus decided to use me as a weapon. I'm not sitting on the sidelines while you fight battles I'm part of. Something heated flashed in Adrian's eyes, and for a moment Evelyn thought he might kiss her. Wanted him to kiss her, but he just squeezed her hand once and stepped back, the professional mask sliding back into place. Carter's waiting in the security office. Don't be late. The surveillance equipment turned out to be surprisingly simple. A laptop with a built-in camera that looked like any other laptop, earbuds that doubled as microphones, and a phone app that would record everything the camera captured. Carter walked Evelyn through it twice, making sure she understood how to position the laptop for optimal viewing and how to act natural if anyone approached her. The cafe is called Meridian Grounds, Carter said, showing her photos of the location. Upscale, popular with business people, lots of ambient noise that will help cover any sounds you make. You'll arrive 15 minutes before Marcus is scheduled to meet Victor, order something complicated that takes time to make, and set up at this specific table. He pointed to a spot near the windows. It has a clear view of the private booths in the back where they'll be sitting. And if something goes wrong, you have 2 security personnel posing as customers at separate tables. If there's trouble, they'll extract you immediately. But there won't be trouble. This is just reconnaissance. Famous last words, Evelyn thought, but she nodded. An hour later, she was sitting in Meridian Grounds, a cafe so aggressively trendy that the menu included things like activated charcoal lattes and adaptogenic mushroom mochas, with a laptop open to a document that made her look like she was working on something important. The camera was angled to capture the private booths, and her earbuds were recording every sound. Marcus arrived first, exactly on time, wearing a suit that was slightly wrinkled and an expression that suggested he'd slept as poorly as Adrian. He took a booth in the back, ordered something from a server who looked terrified of him, and checked his phone obsessively. Viktor Kozlov arrived 10 minutes later, and Evelyn understood immediately why Adrian was concerned. The man radiated danger in a way that was different from Adrian's controlled menace. Victor was older, maybe late 50s, with gray hair slicked back and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. He moved like someone who'd spent time in environments where hesitation meant death, and when he slid into the booth across from Marcus, his bodyguards positioned themselves at nearby tables with the efficiency of professional soldiers. Evelyn adjusted her laptop slightly, making sure the camera captured both men, and pretended to type while she listened. "You're late," Marcus said, his voice carrying just enough for the microphone to pick up. "I'm exactly on time," Victor replied in accented English. "You're just nervous." "I have reason to be nervous. My brother just declared war on me in front of half the city's elite." "Yes, I heard about that. Quite the performance. Adrian always did have a flair for the dramatic." Victor accepted a drink from the server, something clear and strong, probably vodka, and leaned back. "So tell me, Marcus, what exactly do you want from me?" "Support, resources, access to your distribution networks." Marcus's hands were clenched on the table. "Adrian has locked me out of legitimate operations. I need alternative revenue streams. And what do I get in exchange for this support? 20% of my territories once I take control, full partnership on any new ventures, and information about Adrian's operations that you could never get otherwise." Victor was quiet for a moment, studying Marcus like he was a specimen under a microscope. "You're asking me to help you commit a coup against your own brother. I'm asking you to invest in the winning side of an inevitable conflict. There's nothing inevitable about this, Marcus. Adrian is smarter than you, more ruthless than you, and significantly better at managing complex operations. The only advantage you have is that he still has some misguided loyalty to family, which prevents him from killing you outright." Victor took a drink. "But that's changing, isn't it? This woman, Evelyn Park, she's shifted the equation. Evelyn's heart stopped. She forced herself to keep typing, to maintain her cover while her mind raced. "She's a vulnerability," Marcus said. "Adrian's never cared about anyone the way he cares about her. It makes him predictable, exploitable. And yet your first attempt to exploit that vulnerability failed spectacularly. 4 men dead, your hired contractor in Adrian's custody, and you exposed as the orchestrator. Not exactly a successful operation." "That was a test, to see how far Adrian would go to protect her. Now I know." "And what did you learn?" "That he'll burn everything down rather than let her be hurt. Which means, if I can't get to her through force, I need to get to her through trust." Marcus leaned forward. "She's still new to this world, still figuring out who she is in it. If I can convince her that Adrian is using her, that she's just another asset to him, she'll leave. And when she does, Adrian will fall apart." Victor laughed, the sound cold and humorless. "You think you can manipulate a woman who just survived an assault on Adrian's estate and emerged standing beside him at the city's most important social event? You're stupider than I thought." She's scared, confused. She doesn't understand what she's gotten herself into. "All I need is an opportunity to show her the truth about my brother, that he destroys everything he touches, that being with him is a death sentence, that she should run while she still can." "And you think she'll believe you?" "She'll believe evidence. Documentation of Adrian's crimes, testimony from people he's hurt, proof that he's not the protector she thinks he is, but a monster wearing a good suit." Marcus pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. "This is everything I've compiled over the last 3 years. Every questionable business deal, every death that can be connected to him, every law he's broken. It's enough to either send him to prison or destroy his reputation completely." Victor flipped through the folder, his expression giving nothing away. "This is comprehensive, damaging, but using it against Adrian directly would start a war that neither of us would win cleanly. The city's power structure is built on mutually assured destruction. We all have files like this on each other. I'm not suggesting we use it against Adrian directly. I'm suggesting we use it to break his relationship with Evelyn. Show her who he really is. Let her make the choice to leave. And when she does, when Adrian is emotionally compromised and strategically weakened, then we move." Evelyn's hands were shaking now, making it hard to type. She wanted to close the laptop, to run back to the estate and warn Adrian about every word of this conversation. But she forced herself to stay still, to keep listening. "There's a flaw in your plan," Victor said. "You're assuming Evelyn Park is naive enough to be shocked by Adrian's past. But anyone who's spent more than 5 minutes in his world knows exactly what he is. If she's still there, still standing beside him after everything that's happened, it's because she's already made peace with his nature. Your evidence won't change that. Then I'll create new evidence, something she can't ignore, something that proves he's willing to sacrifice her the moment she becomes inconvenient." Marcus's voice had taken on a desperate edge. "I need this, Victor. I need Adrian out of power, and I need your help to make it happen." "What you need," Victor said slowly, "is to accept that you've already lost this fight. Adrian made his position clear at the gala. You move against him again, you die. He doesn't care that you're brothers. He cares about power and control, and right now you're a threat to both. So you won't help me." "I didn't say that." Victor closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. "I'm saying that if you want my support, you need to bring me something more valuable than paranoid delusions about emotional manipulation. Bring me concrete leverage. Bring me something that actually damages Adrian's operations. Bring me a reason to risk war with the most dangerous man in this city." "What kind of leverage?" "The shipment that was intercepted last week. Adrian's people have been investigating the leak, and they're getting close to finding it. If you can provide me with detailed information about his remaining shipments, routes, timing, contents, I can move against them before he does. Seize the cargo, disrupt his revenue streams, force him to divert resources to damage control. That's the kind of leverage that's worth my investment." Marcus hesitated, and Evelyn could see the calculation in his face. What Victor was asking for would be direct betrayal, not just of Adrian, but of the entire family business. It would cause millions in losses, potentially dozens of deaths, and would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "I'll need time," Marcus said finally. "You have 48 hours. After that, I'm assuming you're not serious, and I'll take this conversation as an interesting anecdote about family dysfunction rather than a legitimate business proposal." Victor stood, buttoning his coat. And Marcus, if Adrian finds out about this meeting, I'll tell him it was your idea, that you came to me and that I refused. I don't need problems with your brother over your desperate power grab." He left, his bodyguards following, and Marcus sat alone in the booth, staring at the folder like it held answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. Evelyn closed her laptop carefully, packed up her things, and walked out of the cafe on legs that felt like they might collapse at any moment. The security personnel followed at a distance, maintaining their cover, and she made it to the waiting car before her hands started shaking so badly she couldn't open the door. Carter appeared from nowhere, opening it for her. "You okay, ma'am?" "I need to talk to Adrian, now." The drive back to the estate took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Evelyn's mind kept replaying the conversation, cataloging every threat, every plan, every piece of evidence that Marcus had compiled. Adrian needed to know. Needed to understand that his brother wasn't just planning a coup, but was willing to destroy the entire family business to achieve it. Adrian was exactly where she'd left him, standing by the windows in his office, now on a different phone call that sounded equally unpleasant. He held up one finger when she entered, "Wait," and finished the conversation with a curt, "Handle it," before hanging up. "How did it go?" he asked, turning to face her. "Your brother is planning to betray you to Viktor Kozlov. He's offering detailed information about your shipments in exchange for support in taking you down." The words tumbled out in a rush. "And he has a file. Documentation of everything you've done, every crime, every questionable deal. He's planning to use it to destroy your relationship with me by showing me who you really are." Adrian's expression didn't change, but something happened behind his eyes, a shift from controlled to predatory. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." Evelyn recounted the entire conversation, not pausing, barely breathing, trying to capture every nuance and implication. Adrian listened without interrupting, his face carved from stone, his hands curled into fists that suggested violence was being actively suppressed. When she finished, the silence stretched for long enough that Evelyn started to wonder if she'd done something wrong. "He has 48 hours to provide Viktor with shipment information," Adrian said finally, his voice eerily calm. "Which means we have 48 hours to decide how to handle this before it becomes a crisis." "You're going to stop him." "I'm going to destroy him." Adrian moved to his desk, pulling out his phone and typing something. "Marcus just committed treason against the family. There's no coming back from that. No reconciliation, no forgiveness, no brotherly loyalty that supersedes this betrayal." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done years ago when he first started causing problems." Adrian looked at her, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. "I'm going to remove him from the business permanently, strip him of assets, sever all ties, and make it very clear to everyone in our world that he's no longer protected by the Voss name. After that, if Viktor wants him, he can have him. That's essentially a death sentence. That's the consequence of betrayal." Adrian set down his phone. "But first, I need to address the file he mentioned, the one documenting my crimes." Evelyn's stomach tightened. "It exists, then? Everything he said about you?" "Yes." The confirmation hit harder than she'd expected. She'd known, intellectually, that Adrian operated outside the law. That his business involved things that were illegal and immoral and probably unforgivable. But hearing him confirm it so casually, without defense or explanation, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Why?" she asked. "Why do any of it? You're smart enough to make money legitimately. You don't need the criminal enterprises." "You're right, I don't need them. But my father built this empire on both legitimate and illegitimate operations. And when he died, I inherited all of it. I could have divested the criminal elements, cleaned up the business, become respectable. But that would have left a power vacuum that someone else would have filled. Someone worse, probably. Someone without even the pretense of ethics." Adrian moved closer to her. "So I kept control. I maintained operations. And I tried to minimize the damage while maximizing the profit. It's not noble. It's barely defensible. But it's the choice I made. And the people you've hurt, the deaths Marcus documented, are real. And if you want to read that file to see the full accounting of my sins, I'll have Carter get you a copy. You deserve to know exactly who you're standing beside." Adrian's hand came up, cupping her face. "But I need you to understand something, Evelyn. Everything I've done, every choice I've made, comes with consequences I live with every day. I'm not a good man. I'm barely a decent one. And being with me means accepting that truth. Evelyn leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. Marcus thinks showing me that file will make me leave you. Will it? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Evelyn opened her eyes and looked at Adrian, really looked at him. Saw the man who'd protected her when he could have just fired her. Who'd declared war on his own brother rather than let her be hurt. Who'd given her a choice about what happened to Daniel instead of just making the decision himself. Who was offering to show her the worst parts of himself because he believed she deserved the truth. No, she said quietly. It won't. Because I'm not naive enough to think you're perfect, and I'm not interested in the sanitized version of you that plays well at charity galas. I want the real version, crimes and consequences and all. Adrian's thumb traced her cheekbone, his eyes searching her face like he was trying to read her thoughts. You're sure? I'm terrified, but I'm sure. He kissed her then, finally, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that had been building since that first day in his office. Evelyn kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, her body pressed against his. 3 days of tension and fear and undeniable attraction finding an outlet in the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I need to handle Marcus, he said, his voice rough. And I need to do it before he can give Victor any information. But after that we figure out what this is, Evelyn finished. Together. Together, Adrian agreed. His phone rang, shattering the moment. He answered it with a sharp, "What?" that suggested whoever was calling had terrible timing. Carter's voice came through, loud enough that Evelyn could hear. Sir, we have a situation. Marcus just arrived at the estate demanding to see you. He has 3 men with him, all armed. Security is containing them at the front entrance, but he's making threats. Adrian's expression went cold. What kind of threats? He's saying that if you don't meet with him immediately, he's going to release the file to every media outlet in the city. He's giving you 10 minutes. Adrian looked at Evelyn, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. Tell Marcus I'll meet him in the main foyer, alone. But his men stay outside, and if he tries anything, security has permission to respond with appropriate force. Sir, do it, Carter. Adrian hung up and turned to Evelyn. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't come out until I come get you. No. Evelyn grabbed his arm. If he's here to threaten you, I should be there. We're in this together, remember? Evelyn, you told me you wouldn't ask me to be invisible again. That includes hiding while you face your brother. She held his gaze, refusing to back down. Either we do this together or you lock me in this office and prove that Marcus was right about you seeing me as a liability instead of a partner. Adrian stared at her for a long moment, and Evelyn could see the internal battle playing out behind his eyes. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. Together, but you stay behind me, and if things get violent, you run. Understood? Understood. They left the office together, moving through the mansion toward the main foyer. Evelyn could feel the tension in Adrian, the controlled violence just waiting to be unleashed. His hand found hers, squeezing once, and then they were stepping into the foyer where Marcus waited. Adrian's brother looked like hell. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he had the desperate energy of someone who'd run out of options and was about to do something catastrophically stupid. Adrian, Marcus said, his voice too loud in the space, we need to talk. Then talk. You have 9 minutes left before I have security throw you off the property. You can't do this. Can't cut me out of the family. Can't choose some girl over your own blood. Marcus's eyes slid to Evelyn, and the hatred in them was palpable. What did she do to you? What kind of spell did she cast that made you forget everything we built together? We didn't build anything together, Marcus. I built it. You just benefited from having the right last name. Adrian's voice was cold. And Evelyn didn't do anything except survive in a world you tried to use her as a pawn in. Every consequence you're facing now is the result of your own choices. My choices? Marcus laughed, the sound unhinged. You're the one who started this war by flaunting her at the gala. You're the one who chose her over family. This is on you, Adrian. 8 minutes, Adrian said calmly. Fine. You want to know what I'm going to do? I'm going to release the file, every crime, every death, every illegal operation documented in painful detail. I'm going to send it to the police, the FBI, every news outlet that matters. And when they arrest you, when your empire collapses and your precious Evelyn sees you in handcuffs, maybe then you'll understand what you've lost. Do it, Adrian said, and Marcus froze. Release the file. Destroy my reputation. Get me arrested. Because the moment you do, I release my file on you. Every embezzlement, every deal you've made behind my back, every betrayal documented in equally painful detail. We'll go down together, Marcus. And unlike you, I'm prepared for that outcome. You're bluffing. Try me. Adrian took a step forward, and Marcus instinctively backed up. You think I've survived this long without insurance? Without documentation of everyone around me, including family? The difference between us is that I never planned to use mine unless you forced my hand. Congratulations. You forced it. Marcus's face had gone pale. You'd really destroy everything our father built? Our father built an empire on paranoia and violence. If it burns, maybe something better can rise from the ashes. But either way, I'm done pretending you're anything other than a liability. Adrian pulled out his phone, typing something. I've just sent instructions to my legal team. As of this moment, you're removed from all family business operations. Your accounts are frozen, your access is revoked, and your employment is terminated. You have 24 hours to vacate any property owned by family companies. After that, security will remove you by force. Adrian, get out of my house, Marcus. And if you ever threaten Evelyn again, if you ever come near her or speak her name or even think about using her as a weapon, I will forget we're related and treat you like any other enemy. Do you understand? Marcus looked between Adrian and Evelyn, his expression twisting through rage and disbelief and something that might have been grief. Then he turned and walked toward the door, his shoulders slumped in defeat. At the threshold, he paused. This isn't over, Adrian. You think you've won, but you've just guaranteed we both lose. And when it all falls apart, when she leaves you because she finally understands what you are, remember that I tried to save you from yourself. Then he was gone, and the foyer fell silent except for Evelyn's ragged breathing. Adrian stood perfectly still for a moment, his back rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. Then he turned to Evelyn, and the expression on his face broke her heart. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said quietly. Don't apologize. Not for protecting yourself. Not for protecting me. Evelyn closed the distance between them, taking his hand. What happens now? Now I make sure Marcus can't cause any more damage. And then Adrian pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like he was afraid she might disappear. Then we figure out how to survive in a world where I just destroyed what was left of my family. Evelyn held him, feeling the tension slowly drain from his body, and tried not to think about all the ways this could still go wrong. Marcus was desperate. Victor was opportunistic. And somewhere in the shadows, there were probably a dozen other threats she didn't even know about yet. But right now, in this moment, she had Adrian's arms around her and the certainty that he'd chosen her over everything else. It wasn't safe. It wasn't smart. It probably wasn't sustainable. But it was real. And for someone who'd spent her entire life being invisible, being chosen felt like everything. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other in the foyer that had witnessed Marcus's final attempt at control. Eventually, Adrian pulled back, his hands framing Evelyn's face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. Come with me, he said quietly. There's something you need to see. He led her through the mansion to a part of the estate she'd never been to, a wing that required 3 separate security clearances and a biometric scan that made Evelyn realize just how deep Adrian's paranoia ran. They descended stairs that seemed to go on forever, past reinforced doors and cameras that tracked their every movement, until they reached a room that looked like something out of a spy movie. It was a vault, essentially. Climate-controlled, lined with filing cabinets and safes, containing what Evelyn suspected was every secret Adrian had ever accumulated. He moved to a specific cabinet, entering a code, and pulled out a thick folder that looked identical to the one Marcus had shown Victor. This is my file, Adrian said, setting it on the table in the center of the room. Everything Marcus threatened to release and more. I'm giving you the chance to read it before you make any more decisions about being part of my life." Evelyn stared at the folder like it might explode. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. Because if we're doing this, if we're really doing this, you need to know what you're signing up for. Not the sanitized version I show the world, but the actual reality of what I am and what I've done." Adrian pushed the folder toward her. "Read it, all of it. And when you're done, if you still want to be here, we'll figure out what comes next. And if I don't want to be here after reading it," Adrian's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady, "then I'll arrange for you to disappear. New identity, new city, enough money to take care of your mother for life. You'll be safe, and you'll be free, and I'll make sure no one ever finds you." Evelyn picked up the folder, feeling the weight of it, physical and metaphorical. This was the moment, the choice that would define everything that came after. She could open it and confront the reality of Adrian's past, or she could set it down and walk away from all of it. She opened it. The first section detailed financial crimes, money laundering operations that ran through dozens of legitimate businesses, tax evasion schemes that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy, fraud on a scale that affected thousands of people. The numbers were staggering. Millions moved through shell companies, hidden in offshore accounts, transformed from dirty money into clean investments. The second section was worse. It documented violence. Not all of it Adrian's doing directly, but all of it connected to his operations. Men who'd been killed for stealing from shipments, competitors who'd disappeared after trying to move into his territories, informants who'd been silenced permanently. The deaths were clinical in their description, names, dates, methods, but Evelyn could read between the lines and see the human cost. The third section detailed corruption, judges on his payroll, police officers who looked the other way, politicians who voted how he told them to vote, an entire ecosystem of bought loyalty that kept Adrian's empire running despite the illegality of half his operations. She read all of it, every page, every name, every crime. It took 2 hours, and by the end her hands were shaking and her eyes burned from not blinking enough. Adrian sat across from her the entire time, not speaking, just waiting. When she finally closed the folder, the silence was suffocating. "Say something," Adrian said, his voice rough. "How many of these people did you kill yourself?" Evelyn asked. 4. The others were contracted out or handled by security. 4. Evelyn repeated the number, trying to make it real in her mind. "You've personally killed 4 people." "Yes." "Why?" "Because they were threats I couldn't neutralize any other way. Because they knew things that would have gotten other people killed. Because in that moment, it was them or the stability of everything I'd built." Adrian leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm not asking you to forgive those deaths or to understand them. I'm asking you to accept that they happened and that I would make the same choices again if I had to." Evelyn closed her eyes, processing. This was it. The reality she'd been dancing around since that first day when she'd spilled sugar, and Adrian had looked at her like she was a problem worth solving. He was a criminal, a killer, a man who operated in shadows and justified his actions with logic that most people would find horrifying. But he was also the man who'd protected her when he could have just fired her, who'd declared war on his own brother rather than let her be used as a pawn, who'd offered her a choice about Daniel instead of just making the decision himself, who was sitting here now waiting for her judgment when he could have just lied or manipulated or hidden the truth. "I should leave," Evelyn said, opening her eyes. "Any reasonable person would read that file and run as far as they could." "Yes," Adrian agreed, "but I'm not going to." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, relief mixed with disbelief. "Why not?" "Because I'm tired of being reasonable. I've spent my whole life being reasonable, being invisible, playing it safe. And where did it get me? Working as a maid, barely scraping by, watching my mother die slowly because I couldn't afford better treatment." Evelyn stood, the folder forgotten on the table. "You're offering me something different, something dangerous and complicated and probably doomed, but different. And I'm choosing it. I'm choosing you." Adrian was on his feet in an instant, closing the distance between them, his hands tangling in her hair as he kissed her with a desperation that made her knees weak. Evelyn kissed him back, pouring 3 days of fear and confusion and undeniable attraction into the connection. And when they finally broke apart, Both breathing hard, she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Hope. "I need to tell you something," Adrian said, his forehead resting against hers. "About your mother." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "What about her?" "I've been paying for her treatment. Not just the basic care the facility provides, but experimental therapies, the best oncologists in the country, everything that might give her a chance." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "I started 3 days ago, right after the attack. I wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, she'd be taken care of." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to feel obligated. Didn't want you to stay with me because you felt like you owed me for helping your mother. I wanted your choice to be about us, not about gratitude or debt." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "The treatments are working?" "The doctors are cautiously optimistic. Her latest scans show significant improvement. They're talking about remission being possible within 6 months." Adrian's thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. "Whatever you decide about us, that doesn't change. Your mother gets the treatment, gets the care, for as long as she needs it." "You're trying to make it impossible for me to leave you," Evelyn said, but there was no accusation in her voice, just understanding. "I'm trying to take care of the people who matter to me. Your mother matters because she matters to you, and you—" Adrian's voice dropped to something raw and honest. "You matter in ways I don't have words for yet." Evelyn kissed him again, softer this time, trying to communicate what she couldn't quite articulate, that she understood what he was offering, that she was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure, that she was choosing this with her eyes open, consequences and all. When they finally left the vault, ascending back into the main house, the world felt different. The same mansion, the same hallways, but everything shifted by the choice Evelyn had made. She wasn't just Adrian's assistant anymore, wasn't just someone under his protection. She was his partner in whatever came next. What came next turned out to be complicated. Marcus didn't go quietly. Over the next 2 weeks, he tried everything. Legal challenges to his removal from the business, attempts to turn Adrian's associates against him, even a half-hearted effort to sell information to the FBI. None of it worked. Adrian had spent years building a network that was loyal to him personally, not to the Voss family name, and Marcus discovered too late that he had no real power without his brother's backing. Viktor Kozlov, seeing which way the wind was blowing, withdrew his offer of support and made it clear to everyone in their world that Marcus was no longer worth investing in. Without allies, without resources, without the protection of family, Marcus became exactly what Adrian had predicted: irrelevant. The last Evelyn heard, he'd left the city entirely, relocating to somewhere on the West Coast where the Voss name meant nothing and he could start over as just another failed businessman with delusions of grandeur. Daniel Morrison disappeared more literally. Adrian never told Evelyn exactly where he'd sent her ex or what condition he was in when he got there, and Evelyn decided she didn't need to know. The restraining order was made permanent, and a quiet legal settlement ensured that Daniel would never come within 100 miles of her again. Whether that was because he'd agreed to the terms or because he was physically incapable of traveling that far, Evelyn didn't ask. The fallout from the gala took longer to settle. The city's elite spent weeks dissecting Adrian's public declaration, analyzing what it meant for power dynamics and social hierarchies. Some of Adrian's business partners were uncomfortable with how much influence Evelyn seemed to have over him. Others saw an opportunity to curry favor by being friendly to her. Evelyn learned to navigate it all. Patricia became her unlikely mentor, teaching her the subtle art of social warfare: who to talk to, what to say, how to smile while mentally cataloging information that might be useful later. It wasn't that different from being a maid, Evelyn realized. Both required being invisible when it served you and visible when it mattered. The difference was that now she got to choose which one she was. 6 months after the Sugar Bowl incident that had started everything, Evelyn stood in Adrian's office, their office now, since she'd claimed the desk by the windows as her permanent workspace, reviewing documents for a meeting with the board of directors. The legitimate board, the one that oversaw the legal businesses that generated most of their actual revenue. "You ready for this?" Adrian asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Ready to sit in a room full of old men who think I'm sleeping with you to get ahead?" Evelyn leaned back against him. "Always. You are sleeping with me." "Yes, but I'm also good at my job, which they conveniently ignore. Evelyn turned in his arms, adjusting his tie that didn't need adjusting. What's the agenda again? Quarterly earnings, new acquisitions, and a proposal to establish a charitable foundation focused on healthcare access for low-income families. Adrian's eyes searched her face. Your idea. Your project. They'll try to tear it apart because it wasn't their idea, and because it doesn't generate immediate profit. Good thing I've spent 6 months learning how to tear back. They went to the meeting together, Evelyn in a suit that cost more than her first car, but made her look like someone who deserved to be in that boardroom. The directors were exactly as difficult as she'd expected, questioning the foundation's purpose, suggesting the money could be better spent elsewhere, implying that Evelyn was too inexperienced to manage such a large initiative. She handled each objection with facts and projections and a calm professionalism that she'd learned from watching Adrian operate. By the end of the meeting, the foundation was approved with full funding, and 2 of the directors who'd been most opposed actually apologized for underestimating her. That was impressive, Adrian said as they left the building, heading toward the car. I learned from the best, Evelyn replied, sliding into the passenger seat. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the city passing by outside the windows. It was the same city Evelyn had lived in her whole life, but it looked different now. Less imposing, more navigable, like she'd finally figured out the map everyone else had been reading all along. I have something for you, Adrian said as they pulled up to the estate. It's not my birthday. I know, but I saw it and thought of you, and I wanted... He stopped, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Just come with me. He led her through the mansion to the garage, which housed a collection of cars that ranged from practical to absolutely ridiculous. But Adrian walked past all of them to a door at the back that Evelyn had never noticed before. Inside was a studio. Not a car storage space, but an actual art studio, with easels and canvases and supplies that looked like they'd been chosen by someone who actually knew what artists needed. I remembered you said you wanted to be a teacher, Adrian said quietly. And I thought maybe you still like to paint. Your apartment had those watercolors hidden in the closet, the ones you probably thought no one would notice. Evelyn's throat was tight. She'd forgotten about those watercolors, painted years ago when she'd still had time and energy for hobbies that didn't pay bills. She'd hidden them because they represented a version of herself she thought she'd lost. You did this for me? She managed. I wanted you to have a space that was yours. Not connected to work, not connected to me unless you wanted it to be. Just yours. Adrian looked almost nervous, which was so unlike him that Evelyn's heart did something complicated in her chest. If you hate it, we can change it. Make it something else. I just thought... She kissed him, cutting off his rambling, pouring everything she couldn't say into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, Adrian was smiling, a real smile. Not the controlled one he showed the world, but something genuine and unguarded. I love it, Evelyn said. I love this. She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Too much, too soon, too honest. I love you too, Adrian said, making the leap she'd been too scared to make. In case that wasn't clear from the custom art studio or the experimental cancer treatments or the literal war I started with my brother over you. Evelyn laughed, the sound watery and relieved. Yeah, I guess those were pretty big hints. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the studio, Evelyn tentatively picking up a brush, while Adrian sat on a stool and watched. And for the first time in years, she painted something just because she wanted to. Not for school, not for anyone's approval, just for the pure joy of creating something that hadn't existed before. It was terrible. The proportions were wrong, the colors clashed, and the composition looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never actually seen a landscape before. But it was hers, and that mattered more than technical perfection. That's really bad, Adrian observed, tilting his head like maybe looking at it from a different angle would help. I'm aware. I love it anyway. You're biased. Extremely. He stood, moving behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. But I meant what I said. I love you, Evelyn Park. Even though you're terrible at painting and you still sometimes look at me like you expect me to turn into a monster. You are a monster, Evelyn said, leaning back against him. You're just my monster now. The months that followed settled into something that resembled normalcy. If normalcy could be defined as living with a man who ran a criminal empire while also attending board meetings and charity events. Evelyn's mother responded to the experimental treatments better than anyone had hoped, achieving full remission within 8 months. She moved into a private care facility closer to the estate, where Evelyn could visit her regularly without the 3-hour drive. The healthcare foundation Evelyn had proposed became her primary focus. She hired a team, established partnerships with hospitals and clinics, and started providing free cancer treatments to families who couldn't afford them. It was funded entirely by the legitimate side of Adrian's business, but Evelyn knew the money that made those businesses successful came from sources she still didn't ask about. She'd made peace with that contradiction. Not because she thought it was right, but because she'd learned that moral absolutes didn't survive contact with reality. Adrian was a criminal, yes, but he was also funding healthcare for hundreds of families, supporting her mother's recovery, and building something that might actually make the world slightly less terrible. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. A year after the Sugar Bowl incident, Adrian took Evelyn back to the museum where the gala had been held. The same building, but this time it was closed to the public, reserved for just the two of them. "Why are we here?" Evelyn asked as they walked through empty galleries filled with art worth more than small countries. "Because this is where I declared war on my brother, where I made it clear to everyone who mattered that you were mine." Adrian stopped in front of a painting, something modern and abstract that Evelyn didn't understand but appreciated anyway. "And I wanted to replace that memory with something better." He turned to face her, and Evelyn's breath caught when she saw the small box in his hand. "I'm not good at this," Adrian said, his voice rough. "I don't know how to do the romantic speech or the grand gesture. But I know that my life was empty before you spilled sugar on my desk. And I know that I want to spend whatever time I have left making sure you never regret choosing to stay." He opened the box, revealing a ring that was somehow both understated and devastating. A single diamond set in platinum, elegant in its simplicity. "Marry me," he said. Not a question, but not quite a command either. Something in between. "Build this empire with me. Transform it into something that doesn't require quite so many files documenting crimes. Help me become someone who deserves you instead of just someone who's lucky enough to have you." Evelyn looked at the ring, at Adrian's face, at the empty museum around them. She thought about the invisible girl she'd been, the woman she'd become, and the person she was still figuring out how to be. She thought about sugar bowls and covered bodies and her mother's face when the doctor said remission. She thought about art studios and charity foundations, and the complicated math of loving someone who operated in moral gray areas. "Yes," she said, because despite everything, despite the danger and the complications, and the absolute certainty that this would never be a normal life, she wanted this, wanted him, wanted the future they could build together, crimes and consequences and all. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, because of course it did. He'd probably had Patricia research her ring size weeks ago, had probably planned this entire thing with the same strategic precision he applied to business deals. "I love you," Evelyn said, the words easier now that she'd said them before. "I know," Adrian replied, pulling her close. "You told me with every choice you made, every time you stayed when you could have run, every moment you stood beside me instead of hiding behind me, I've known for months. Arrogant. Observant." He kissed her, and Evelyn kissed him back, and somewhere in the museum, a security camera was probably recording this moment for posterity. They'd have to delete that footage later. Adrian was paranoid about security, and Evelyn had learned to appreciate that paranoia because it kept them both alive. But for now, in this moment, she let herself believe in the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by fear or survival, but by choice. The choice to build something new from the ruins of what they'd both been before. The choice to transform violence into protection, control into partnership, empire into foundation. It wouldn't be perfect. Perfect wasn't possible in a world where love stories started with sugar bowls and ended with marriage proposals and empty museums. But it would be theirs, complex and messy and undeniably real. Evelyn Park had spent her whole life being invisible, surviving by not being seen. Now she was standing in the center of her own story, wearing a ring that declared she belonged to someone and that someone belonged to her, building a future that looked nothing like the life she'd thought she'd have. And she'd never been more visible, more terrified, more certain that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 6 months after the proposal, they married in a small ceremony at the estate with only Patricia, Carter, and Evelyn's mother in attendance. No grand gestures, no society witnesses, just a quiet declaration that they were choosing each other completely. Marcus wasn't invited. Daniel was presumably somewhere far away, living whatever life Adrian had arranged for him. The city's elite would gossip about the private ceremony for weeks, but neither Adrian nor Evelyn cared. The healthcare foundation expanded, opening clinics in 3 cities and helping over 1,000 families in its first year. Adrian slowly divested from the more violent aspects of his operations, not becoming legitimate overnight, but moving in that direction incrementally. It would take years, maybe decades, and some things would never be clean. But the trajectory had changed. Evelyn kept painting. Her work never got technically better, but she didn't care. The studio became her sanctuary, the place where she could be just herself instead of Adrian's wife, or the foundation's director, or the woman whose story everyone in their world knew. And sometimes, late at night when they were alone in the massive bed in the master bedroom that was now theirs together, Adrian would trace the line of her spine and tell her about the day she'd spilled sugar on his desk. How he'd been planning to fire her immediately. How he'd been furious about the breach of his private office. How everything had changed the moment she'd looked at him with curiosity instead of fear. "You saved me," he'd say, his voice quiet in the darkness. "You saved me first," Evelyn would reply, because it was true. He'd seen her when she was invisible, had chosen her when she was nobody, had given her the chance to become someone she'd never imagined she could be. They saved each other, really. Adrian from becoming the monster his father had been, Evelyn from disappearing entirely into a life of survival and invisibility. Together they'd built something that was theirs, imperfect and complicated and occasionally illegal, but theirs nonetheless. And if that wasn't a happy ending, it was close enough for 2 people who'd started their story with a sugar bowl and a moment of terrible, wonderful visibility. The city kept turning, the empire kept running, the foundation kept growing, and in the middle of it all, Evelyn Park, now Evelyn Voss, stood visible and powerful and exactly who she'd chosen to become. Not invisible. Not anymore. Never again.